You heard about skinwalkers from the Navajo rest, but have you heard about the elbow lady? My dad used to tell me about her. We are from Oklahoma, and he says that the elbow lady lives in the forest in Stillwell, Oklahoma. I ended up laughing when he first told me about her, because the thought of her chasing people on her elbows was sort of funny. But he wasn't joking or trying to be funny about it. He told me that he was told that she's actually a witch who practiced bad medicine, and she was cursed. Other people say that she's an evil spirit. Basically, people have encountered her in the woods. She has no feet, no hands, so she uses her elbows to get close to people, to quote unquote walk, crawl, or whatever. My dad told me that him and his two buddies, they went hunting one day, and they came across her when they were on their way back home at night. At least he said it was her. He said they were just walking, chit-chatting, when they started hearing some cracking, scraping sounds. It was coming from the side of them, and they saw what seemed to be a dark dog. It was coming towards them, but it was moving really slow. When they shined their flashlights, they realized it was a person laying down on the ground, just standing still. They got a bit closer and realized it was a woman. At first they thought she was injured. Maybe she was lost. She was skinny, from what they could tell. She was like hugging something on the ground, covering it. She also had long hair that went across her face. Her clothes looked like they were rotting off her body, completely shredded. She didn't say anything when they called out to her, not even crying or asking for help, but she just stayed there on the ground, looking down. My dad said they decided to go check on her because what if she needed help? So they ended up walking closer, but just when they were about 3 or 4 feet away, she ended up twitching. Then she started to crawl. They all backed away a bit, and my dad said that she didn't use her hands. She didn't push herself with her knees. She began to drag herself using only her elbows because she had no fucking arms. My dad said that her body moved across the dirt real jerky, and that's when they realized that's the noise that made them stop in the first place. They all took off running. As they did, my dad said not to look back because they kept hearing those sounds all around them. They eventually made it out the woods and debated about what to do. They ended up dialing emergency services as soon as they made it back into town, and they all went with a search party the next day, but they couldn't find anybody or anything. As time went on, people kept talking about how they would see a random figure, or someone would say that they went into the woods, and they would claim to see a woman who needed help. Others even say that similar to the Skinwalker and other things, she is drawn to those who give her attention, but mainly you can tell she's around when you start to hear those sounds. Apparently an elder told my dad that she appears in dreams before showing up in person. This is actually the only time that I ever heard about the elbow lady. Has anybody else heard about her? Obviously she can't be human, because no person could live like that out there. I'm not sure though. What do you all think? I have a question. Have you ever heard an animal yell or talk like a person? I have. It's really creepy. This happened in Vanderwagen, about 45 minutes out of Gallup. My family and I were experiencing some strange things going on at home. We lived in a trailer home with my mom and grandma, and we also had a dog who stayed in the living room. My grandma had this huge open space in the backyard. There were trees everywhere. It was a nice little tucked in home that made it seem like you were in the middle of nowhere. My mom said that she was planning on getting some livestock soon. Everything started when these random stray horses would come around our house. Only, and I want to clarify that, only in the evenings, and would stick around all night. You would hear them at night making noises. Whenever we would see them out there, my grandma would say that they're just random strays who wander around, to ignore them. Even though it was weird, sometimes I would look out at night and I could see them out in the distance. They were always together, just staring. Me and my sister shared the same room. On this one night, it was summer, and something woke me up. It was around 2 in the morning. I'm just there staring at the ceiling trying to go back to sleep when I hear something outside. Possible footsteps. It sounded like someone walking outside, but it felt like they were trying to be sneaky, quiet. I would hear it, and then it would stop, and then I would hear it again after a few minutes passed by. Maybe it was because I was half asleep, but I decided to go look out the window. When I did sit up in the bed, I noticed my sister was looking at me, which actually freaked me out. I was like, what the heck, dude? Why don't you say something instead of just watching? She told me that she was awake this whole time because someone was outside. I remember I told her all brave. Well, only one way to find out. I went over to the window to open the blinds. When I do, a damn horse is looking right into our window. I'm not talking about 10 feet away. Its nose is actually touching the window, which is scary because we don't have any horses. My sister also saw the horse because we both ended up screaming when we saw it. My reaction right away was to close the blinds. I guess our screaming woke up my mom because she came to our bedroom and she was asking what happened. We explained to her, and instead of being on our side, she was more like, why are y'all looking out the window right now? You know how that goes. Still, she went to go look and we were right behind her. When she opened the blinds, the horse wasn't there no more, but instead, it was actually running around in the field with the other horses. My mom said that those horses are strays, and that's why they don't come near the house, and she told us to go back to bed. So of course after that we couldn't sleep until the sun came up. But the next day before the sun went down, me and my sister went for a walk out in the back. That's when we saw one of those stray horses out in the distance, and just like that, we ended up speed walking back into our home. Now, my grandma had left earlier in the day, and she wasn't home yet, and it was already nighttime. I honestly can't remember where she went, but when we got back home she wasn't there yet. Mom had dinner ready for us, so we were eating, and we were just chit-chatting. That's when we heard noises out in the front door. I thought that was Grandma, so me and my sister both got up to go help her come in. When we went outside, it was Grandma who was getting dropped off. We left the door open, and my grandma was coming up to the door, and I remember she said something about, watch the dog, better not go near those horses. Before I could even ask what she meant, the dog had already gone around the side of the trailer towards the open field. My sister took off behind him, and I also went. As we rounded the corner, I could see the silhouette of one of those horses. Its head was turned just enough to watch us. My stomach dropped and me and my sister both stood still. Our dog, however, ran towards it. That's when it happened. It locked its jaws onto the horse's side. That's when I heard it. It sounded like a man was yelling. And not just a shout. It sounded like one of those angry shouts. Somehow the horse kicked and started galloping and trying to shake off the dog. When it did, it took off and our dog ran back. Me and my sister also ran back inside our home. We shut the door behind us. I told my mom and grandma what happened, and my sister backed me up. My mom simply said something like, we're gonna have to keep the dog tied up, especially when the door opens from now on. My grandma, on the other hand, she said something like, y'all don't listen, huh? That was it. That same night, I think this horse, or whatever it was, maybe a spirit, we could hear scratching on the outside, on the wall itself, and at some point, we could hear what sounded like someone talking outside. I remember I even slept in the same bed with my sister that night. There's a lot more things that happen around that area. it would be too much to write down. I believe there was some crazy shit going on around there. I'll leave you with this though. I did find it a bit strange that my mom and grandma had some sort of fallout, and so we ended up moving about a month after all of this happened. So I have a story that happened to me and my friends, but you might think it's kind of lame. I live in Central Oregon, and my friends invited me to go help them set up some campsite in the woods. It extends a few miles up over a hill and into a small valley type of thing. Sure, why not? It's a long 3-day weekend. I show up with a crap ton of gear. I ended up bringing too many things, so I leave half my stuff at my friend's house. We climb up the steep hill type of thing, and then we hike about 10 miles to the campsite. The weekend before, 2 of my friends had come here to set up a few things like tarps and stuff. We drop our stuff, and then we get to work chopping down trees like good humans. There's 4 of us in total. Everybody is pretty slow except for me, so they put me in firewood duty. I have to go run around finding stuff for the fire, and also organizing some stuff into our shelter. So at this point I've been working for about an hour. I wander off about half a mile away in search of some decent stuff to burn. That's when I hear the snap of a tree branch cracking behind me. I whip around to see what it is. That's when I see the skull of a cow up in the tree, but there's no sign of a branch that was snapping. This area is also open for the rest of the woods, so there should be nobody sneaking up on me here. So I continue on and I find this little wooden shack on the property. It's about 100 years old. It's leaning to one side, and it has huge gaps in the wood. There's nothing inside of it, but it's still pretty neat to see something like this out here. And the skull of the cow to show my friends. I bring back a pile of firewood, and then I start chopping up my huge pile down with an axe. All of this took a bit longer than I wanted to, but after I was done, stood back and took a long proud look at the shelter. It's looking pretty good now. 4 sides, a fire pit in the middle, a room for about 6 people, 8 at most. It's insulated and easily about 10 to 20 degrees warmer. After 6 hours, we're finally done building this thing. We got a fire going, and we start making our delicious sandwiches full of meat and cheese. We talk about school stuff. We play some games, including Screw, Marry, Kill. We also play some cards, just typical guy stuff. The night goes on like this. We have dinner finally. Delicious beef, potatoes and carrots. We're not eating very healthy today, but whatever, it's the weekend. So we continue playing our games. Not very good at the game though. We end up playing some cards. I win a few times and lose a few times. You know, just how the night goes. It's been dark outside for about 2 hours now, and it's in the late winter. Even with the fire, I'm getting sort of cold. We're all rather sleepy now, even though it's like 7 p.m. Now, this is weird. We shouldn't be this sleepy. I'll start to think that somebody within our group drugged us, or something. But I fall asleep in my bag along with the other 3. At some point in the night, I wake up to the sound of a coyote and a dead fire. I throw some stuff on it, and I try to perform fire CPR. It eventually flares up again, and it raised the temperature by about 1,000,000 degrees on the inside of the shelter. I'm still wondering why we're so sleepy. Maybe it was just the work that we put into it. I'm not sure. Everyone else is still asleep at this point. I then reach over to grab my phone. I want to see what one of my friends texted me, but my phone is dead. I'm pretty sure I went to sleep with 2 bars and had it turned off. And I think, oh well, unreliable smartphones from 2015. I then realized that I had to go pee, and it's like the worst it's ever been in my life. Kinda scared to go to the woods, thanks to all those stories that I have read. I'm thinking that there's maybe about 20 goat men, skinwalkers, werewolves, witches. They're all out there just waiting to, you know, eat you or something. But I grab my flashlight, which is super powered, and it can light up half the woods, and I start to think, Alright, I'm gonna do it. So I get up and I walk outside. I shine the flashlight, and that's when I see it. Eyes or something just beyond the range of my flashlight. I trip and fall on my friend's face, and he wakes up screaming. He then wakes up the other two as well. He's pissed off at me. Looking back, maybe he thought I was trying to do something to him. Anyways, I say that I'm sorry, and that I just saw something outside, and it scared me. My friend says that's most likely a deer or something. Again, I apologize. My other two friends, though, are still kinda half awake, but eventually all three go back to bed. I still have the feeling to go pee, so once again, I'll run outside, even though by now I ended up risking some pretty bad bladder damage. I have my flashlight in one hand, and I'll start unzipping my pants with the other. I'm spinning around in circles like a paranoid idiot, and I ended up spraying everywhere. So I feel like I can't have my back against anything, or anybody. So I'm looking around at every detail as I swing the light around, looking for a sign of anything. And then I think to myself, I really am scared. Been like a minute and a half now. When is this pee gonna stop? Finally, I finish my business, and once again, I hear a branch snapping behind me. That's when I book it back to the shelter without even zipping my pants up. I'm running and the light is now flashing everywhere. I dive into the shelter to hide from whatever is out there. I don't feel very safe with that huge opening in the front. It doesn't help that we actually nicknamed the shelter the Alamo. So anyways, I'm shivering in fear in my sleeping bag, and I have a metal baseball bat and a knife at my side. But I sit there for about 10 minutes, and eventually I calm down. My phone is dead, so I'm just there laying down, wishing that I was back home. I tried thinking about happy thoughts, and after about 5 or 10 minutes, I hear it, a drum beat. It's really far away, but I swear it was a drum. I hear it again about a minute later. Even to this day I still have nightmares about it. I then start to think, my friends had to hear that one. And sure enough, one of them is half awake now. My friend shakes the other two awake, and I tell him not to say anything. We all sit there just quiet, listening. A minute or two later we hear the drum beat. I whisper over to them, "This is not fucking good." My life expectancy is dropping by the second. We all grab our knives and stuff to defend ourselves. We didn't think about putting out the fire, but by this point they most likely already know that we're here, and maybe we can burn them or something. I don't fucking know. My friend is trying to find his phone so that he can call the police to come retrieve our dead bodies. We're hiding in the corners of the shelter, ready to stab whoever or whatever the fuck is out there. The drum beat starts to go faster, and we're counting now. It's 15 seconds faster, and it's also getting closer. I then see a light through the opening. A torch. It's over the ridge. It stops getting closer. We debate on getting up and just trying to run the 10 miles or whatever it was to his home. And just as the drum is beating every other second, there's movement on the ridge. A figure walks up, backlit by the torchlight. It stands there for a long time, and then it bends down and seems to put a box on the ground, turns around and walks away, and then the torch goes out. What the fuck just happened? The drum beat picks up again, but at a very slow pace and getting further and further away. The original plan was to stay another night, but because of these events, we decided against it. We packed everything up and just sat up waiting until the sun was rising. One of our friends reminds us of the box. We are already scared, but curious. We walk over to the box that the man dropped. As we approached it, there is a nasty smell. I climb up over the ridge and we see it. There's some sort of decomposing animal head. It looks like a coyote. Attached to the stake is a sign. It says something along the lines of, "This is our land. Do not pass within the boundaries that we have set down." Do not go into the valley. You may set up camp anywhere you wish on these lands, but not in this small valley. Never come back. That's when we think, that's pretty scary. So we start fast walking back home. The sun's trying to rise a bit more. The whole way we feel like we have a dozen eyes on us, but we can't make out anything in the thick fog of the morning. Finally, after what seemed like forever and a day, we made it back home. We slide down a smooth part of the hill into my friend's backyard, and we all run inside and lock the door. We sit on the couches in the living room and we say nothing for about 10 minutes. I break the silence and talk about how good the food was, and we have some leftovers, and just try to shift away from what happened. We have only talked about it one time, maybe twice, and this is why none of us have ever gone camping for over about a year now, which was one of our favorite activities back then. And I'm hoping that was just someone screwing with us and not some kind of weird, fucked up supernatural cult. Either way, it was scary. I got a story about the Monument Valley, Utah area. Growing up, my grandparents took care of my cousin and I. This was while our moms were working. Compared to our moms and uncles, we were spoiled. They told us stories of things they never mentioned to their own kids. One of those things were Skinwalker stories. My cousin and I would pester them until they gave in and told us of their experiences. Some my mom has heard. There is one that her mom never told her. My grandma said that one time when she was younger, she was sleeping with her family in their hogan. I remember she said it happened at the darkest point at night, when the moon sets and the sun won't begin to rise for a few hours. At first, the dogs began to bark and howl like they were going crazy. Inside, she said the whole family began to hear scratching at the door and loud banging noises all around the hogan, after everyone tried to ignore it, as we were all told to do when something like this happens. Well, whatever was nearby, it began to scream. It sounded like a woman screaming, my grandma said. My great-grandfather, he decided he had enough, and he went outside to chase away whatever had come. He saw nothing out front, and then he went around the back of the hogan. As he came around the side, that's when he saw a big, black shadow, but he said it was to the point where it was stretched all the way to the top of the hogan, where it was looking in through the smoke hole. She then said that my great-grandpa had never seen or heard about anything like this before, so he actually started screaming at it. He told my grandma later on that its body was starting to get smaller, and it started leaping away into a nearby tree. At first he could make out its figure, but as he approached, it continued shrinking further into the branches. When he finally got close up to it, it was gone. The next morning, my great-grandpa went outside before the rest of the family was awake. He noticed some tracks. They started just a few steps from the hogan, right where the dogs had been going crazy. He said at first, they looked like coyote prints, but the longer he looked at them, the footprints were changing. Some toes were long, like whatever it was had turned its feet backwards before stepping down again. He followed them out into the open field behind the hogan. Out there, he saw more prints, but then he lost track of them. Grandma said that he ended up going out to see an elder who was actually highly respected, and he lived a few miles away. He told him what they had experienced, from the barking dogs to the shadow looking in through the smoke hole to the weird tracks. The elder told my great-grandpa that things like this don't just happen randomly, that they come with a reason. He said it must have been looking for someone, maybe not him, maybe someone else inside. He told him to burn some cedar and juniper inside the hogan, to walk around it while praying, and to keep the ashes from the fire inside a small pouch by the door. He also told great-grandpa that if he hears the noises again, to not go outside, and to not open the door, not even for family, and they all did exactly what they were told. A few weeks later, when the family was sleeping, the dog started to bark again. But then, all of a sudden, just stopped. The next morning, Grandma said that everybody felt the hogan different. She couldn't explain it, but she said it just felt different. Great Grandpa went back to the elder, and he said he would come by in a few days. The elder came, and he performed a ceremony to seal the hogan, and they ended up moving. Apparently, when there's been repeated visits from things such as spirits, skinwalkers, or other things, it's better to just seal it. I got a few more stories from my grandma. It's similar to what happened here. My grandma said something was following them, unless they were just at the wrong place, at the wrong time. Let me know if you would like to hear them. Thanks. I have a story to share about something that happened to me in Window Rock, and honestly, I've been holding on to it for a while. Wonder if you can share this with your listeners to see what they think. I know I should be talking to a medicine man about this, and I am, soon, just not right now. For now, I want to see what people say, because maybe someone out there has been through something similar. I do want to stay anonymous, even though a lot of people around here already know about what happened to us. I don't want it tied back to me. I'm even using a burner account just to talk about it. One night when I was walking home from a native country dance, I came to my driveway. My 2 watchdogs were always watching out for me. They would always come out and greet me after barking at me like if I was gonna break in. So just like other nights, I snuck up on them and see how close I could get to the porch before they noticed. I got about 100 feet close when they jumped up and came running. They started moving real happy as always, until they got halfway. They immediately stopped and stared right into an elm tree in my neighbor's yard. I called them, but they refused to move. I walked over to them and looked over to see what they were staring at. I started scanning the tree. My eyes fell upon a branch that looked like it had a black cat or an owl sitting on it. It was something, but I just laughed and said, "It's most likely a cat." But they stood still, just watching. That's when I started to shoo this cat, or whatever it was, away, yelling and trying to get it to move. That was the other weird thing. It was like it was a statue. So I spoke to it. I was like, "I see you. Now get out of here." It started to move, and it looked directly at me. Even though it was pitch black, the eyes were gleaming. I got a branch and started waving at it. It then began running back and forth on the branch, so I knew it must have been a cat. But then, it fell to the ground, and again, it just stood still. Now it was creeping me out. I guess my curiosity got the best of me, so I walked a bit closer to it. As I did, I'm not sure how to explain it, but it looked like a bird trying to open its wings or something. That's when I decided to move back. And so instead I moved towards my porch where I had a light that was motion activated. When I did, there was more light, and that's when my dog started barking after it. I ran into my home to get reinforcement. As I got inside, I saw my little brother was sleeping on the couch. I ran to the fireplace to get a fire poker. My brother was moving. I assumed he was waking up because of all the noise. So I spoke to him, and that's when he began yelling, "No, get off of me," over and over. I called out to him. I thought he was joking. I had to shake him to wake him up. He looked me in the face and said, "That was the fucking weirdest dream I ever had." I told him to wake up and that there was something outside. That's when he looked at me weird. Basically, he began telling me what I just went through, but the dream he was having. He said it was me fighting a demon. He said it was black, with dark eyes. He said the dream started when I was coming up the road to the house, and as I got off, I saw this demon, or spirit, or whatever it was, looking into one of our windows. He said that I started fighting with it with my dogs, and then all of a sudden, the floor opened up, and fire and smoke started to come out, and that was when I woke him up. He then told me more details of the dream. My brother is gone now. Alcohol took him. We wasted the last 5 years of his life hating each other. We did find peace the last 3 days when he finally sobered up. We talked, and I wanted to hug him, but I didn't. He knew I loved him anyway, despite everything that we'd gone through. The next day, my neighbor cut down that tree. Now the creepy part is that we never really talked much, just a wave here and there. They just randomly cut it down. I didn't say anything to them, and they didn't say anything to me. But I can't help but wonder, did they see something too? Did they hear something? Or maybe something happened to them? You see, us and the rest, we don't really explain things. That's how it is. I did talk to somebody about what happened between us. I have only told one of my friends this so far, and he told me that at least one of us didn't kill each other. It happens too often in tribal families, and this is usually tied to some demonic spiritual source of family conflicts. Do y'all think this was bad medicine? Maybe my brother's drinking would draw evil spirits. What makes it scary is that it almost seems like he was seeing what was happening on a spiritual level, and I was actually living it. So has anyone ever experienced something strange like this, while someone else saw it happen, but I guess in a spiritual sense? Thanks for listening. I'm from Michigan, but I love Appalachia. The mountains are in my blood, not to mention it's the most beautiful place on earth. My grandfather and many generations of my family before him are from West Virginia. Anyways, the story doesn't really take place in Appalachia, but it could have ended there. A few years ago, one of my friend's parents paid me to pick up their daughter from NYC and bring her back to Detroit because she is somewhat disabled and she had missed a few Greyhounds that they had booked for her. The drive to New York was uneventful. I got pulled over for having a broken headlight. I slept in my car at a rest stop, and I woke up in western Pennsylvania to a misty mountain sunrise. I get to New York. The traffic sucked and there was nowhere to park, but I finally ended up finding my friend. She got all her stuff in my vehicle, and off we went. Pretty much everything was going alright, until we decided to stop and rest, again, in the mountains of western Pennsylvania. We chose a Walmart parking lot so we could get some food, and also have access to a bathroom, so that if something did happen to us, there would be cameras. But there were a few shady cars that seemed to take interest in us, so we decided to push west and sleep at a rest stop instead. We tried that. When we got there, we had some snacks and just BS'd until nighttime, so we could safely go to sleep. But then I noticed something. There was a car sitting in the rest stop that looked very similar to one of those shady cars we had seen earlier. A newer Jeep brand SUV, white. I debated for a few minutes whether we should worry about it, since there were tons of people who drive those, and so we just decided to keep pushing west, exhausted, barely able to drive, potentially paranoid, but motivated to find somewhere safe to sleep. Eventually we found another Walmart, and we parked somewhere distant from the door, but not too distant. We talked and BS'd, and eventually we were almost asleep, until another white Jeep Compass pulled up right next to us. I saw his eyes, and I will never forget them. I ended up slamming the transmission from park to drive, and I fucking floored it heading straight for the highway. We flew through the mountains, but couldn't lose the brand new Jeep on the highway. Eventually, We decided to get off and try to lose them by zigzagging and changing roads, heading southwest instead. After daybreak, we found ourselves in a small town with a busy Wendy's, or McDonald's or something, where we finally got some sleep. That night, I was paranoid as hell. I mean, can you blame us? We were followed for about 100 miles. It was the most terrifying thing to have ever happened to me in the mountains so far. My grandmother, who's around 90 years old, has been practicing bad medicine on her own family. I've seen plenty of witchcraft in my life. I'm not supposed to talk about this, about witchcraft and skinwalkers. They're basically the same thing because they go hand in hand. I've been listening to your stories for some time now, and the thing I like most about your channel is that you speak a lot on native culture, not just on the topic of skinwalkers. But after reading some comments on your videos, it seems like you have people who respect our culture and actually are interested in listening. So hopefully you can share this story with them. Well, actually, it's not really a story. I just want to share something that is currently going on in my family. Anybody who listens to this can take it as wisdom or advice to be careful of those around you, especially of your own family. This is going to sound like one of those generational curses or tales or stories from Disney that the family has been carrying down for generations until it's broken. But trust me, this is not like that. Here in the res, people like to gain other people's powers to extend their own lives. They're basically sacrificing their own family for personal selfish gain. I'm from Winslow, Arizona, one of the bigger towns within the res. However, we stay a bit outside of Winslow, right on Bushman to be exact. We no longer live there, which is why I'm fine if you include that part. My mom left us when I was young. Apparently, she took off to Flagstaff with her new boyfriend. That's what my dad told me, at least. I'm sure there's always three sides to the story. My dad's side, my mom's side, and well, of course, the actual true story. Family drama is real, and who knows what's even true within our family. Hell, even now I'm still finding out some things about my own family. I guess let me go back to the very beginning of how everything started, at least from when I think everything started. Sorry if I keep jumping all around, even though now I believe this has been going on for generations. Who knows, maybe I was just caught up in the middle of something. So I was talking with a friend of mine after we finished high school. Her name is Jenny. She lived in one of the mobile homes on the same street as mine. We actually became really good friends in school, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do with our life. Not having anything to do at home, we would spend all afternoon chilling outside just talking. Me growing up with my dad only, he wasn't around that much as he was always working, trying to provide for both of us. And well, Jenny, she grew up with some abusive parents. It's the normal life of some young kids from the res. Now, growing up, we were told about these witches, or skinwalkers. As we were sitting outside her home, the air was quiet. It actually felt very cool, and I can't remember how the conversation started, but I did ask her, "So, do you think they're real?" Jenny stopped for a minute, her eyes scanning the area around. "I don't know," she finally replied, "but I heard things about them. Actually, you know what? My mom told me that there's a road that they use. It runs west across I-40, heading down towards the prison right there, across to a place called Clearwater Creek, down to the Little Painted Desert, and on to Dilkin, Arizona. She said the only reason they go by the prison is to do evil to the inmates. She would say that they travel right by our homes here across the field, so I think it's best that we don't talk about them. The truth is that growing up on the res, stories like these were common. They were warnings to keep us safe. The elders spoke of them and would even give us rules. I'm not gonna lie, when she said that they travel by our neighborhood here, it did creep me out a little bit. Just then, I started coughing, a cough that had been lingering inside of me for a year now. Jenny looked at me. "I can't believe you're still dealing with that cough. Haven't you had it for like years now?" She said, "Have you gone to see one of the local medicine men?" I shook my head. "I've been taking some meds that my father gave me. He claims that they can heal everything." She looked at me confused. "Maybe you need to try something different. One of my family members was sick for a long time, and it's not until he got a cleansing done that he felt better. I have been sick on and off for the past year, for months now, but every time I took the meds they would help me feel better for a bit, but then I would get sick even worse than before. It was like a rebound sickness or whatever it's called, but it seemed like the medications only made things worse. I had no symptoms when I was off the meds, and felt great until I would get sick again. But when I took them, I would get better, but then I would get worse. It felt like my body was under attack. At some point it felt like I was just gonna die. It made my body feel very weak." Just then, Jenny's father's cut through our conversation, angry. "Get inside before it gets dark," he shouted from the doorway. I looked as she flinched at the sound of him. She gave me a small smile before heading towards her home. "Well, stay safe now," she said in a low voice. "You too now," I replied. I took a deep breath and started the 20-minute walk back home, which was on the other side down the road. However, I always walked through the opposite side just to avoid vehicles and people. That night as I went to sleep, I had a dream. A lot of this now makes sense to me, or I should have connected the dots. Especially now that I'm writing this, it's like stuff keeps coming back, and more stuff now makes sense when I think about it. So I always had weird dreams, but if I could go back and trace to try to find when everything started, it's with a dream that really bothered me a few years back. I never believed that someone could do witchcraft on me, especially my own grandma. But I say this because I swear my dream started from when I was a young kid. So I had this one dream a few years back. In my dream there was an old house, a little boy, and also an old man. The little boy goes into the old man's fridge and pulls out from underneath the brown envelope a little black slimy thing, and he swallows it. He starts to get sick and starts coughing, and the old man is watching. I see a little black slimy string hanging out of the little boy's mouth. He seems to be struggling and choking. I reach for it, and the old man, who is dressed in black, tries to stop me. I'm able to get it out, and it happens to be a black snake. When I get it, the old man disappears, and I wake up. Weird dream, huh? Well, if you aren't Navajo or Native, then I'm sure a lot of these things or these dreams might not make sense to you. Some things don't even make sense to me, but I'll explain more about this later. For the next few years growing up, I had similar bad nightmares. I never did tell my dad about it. Well, it's not like anything would happen. The nightmares only happen once or twice a year. It's not like it was every day or once a week. But on this night when I went home, and maybe it's because of what me and Jenny were talking about, but the dream was of me waking up in bed and something was watching me sleep. It was a big black horse that was standing on its hind legs, and it was about to attack me. Don't ask me how the horse fit in the room, but it just did. Apparently, I woke up screaming that my dad had to come see if I was okay. I don't remember doing this, but I believe him because, again, this was the worst thing I had ever seen. I told my dad it was just a nightmare, maybe even what seemed to be sleep paralysis, and he just told me that he was gonna smudge the home, my room, and also me, because in our culture, we believe that when you dream of an animal attacking you, it means that sickness or something not so good is coming, or that one of them has been near you. That's when I told him that I've been having these dreams since I was a kid, but nothing really ever happened. When I said that, I swear my dad started pacing back and forth thinking, and you would think that I had done the unforgivable sin or something. He then quickly started putting ashes around our place, and even on my forehead, apparently to keep the nightmares away. He left my room, and when he came back inside, he had a chair and slammed it down. I won't forget what he said. "Tell me everything. When did this start? What's the earliest that you remember?" Let me just say that my dad wasn't happy that I didn't tell him about my dreams growing up. How was I supposed to remember? But basically, I told him that I would have weird dreams like this once or twice a year, but that this is the first time I had dreamed of an animal attacking me. I kid you not, you won't believe what my dad told me next. He said to try my best not to go to sleep. He said we were gonna go visit a medicine man tomorrow first thing. Pretty crazy, huh? I'm sure I did fall asleep sitting down, but my dad would come check on me throughout the night to make sure I wasn't asleep. He also stayed up all night smudging, praying, and making phone calls. The next morning, my dad and I went to go see a medicine man. He didn't live in our town. We had to travel about an hour to get to him. He lived in a traditional hogan, out in the middle of nowhere. When we got there, the medicine man greeted us. We went inside his hogan. The smell of sage and cedar filled the air, and I felt a sense of peace all over me. The medicine man looked at me and said, "I hear you've been having troubling nightmares." His voice steadied. I nodded. My dad stayed quiet, allowing the medicine man to continue the conversation. "Your great-grandfather," the medicine man began. "He was a powerful medicine man. He once confronted a witch in its half-human, half-animal form. He killed it before blessing the corpse and burning it right away. It required a lot of prayer and courage that only came from the Creator." The medicine man then paused and continued after a few seconds. "Your great-grandfather, he passed down his knowledge, his teachings, his stories, and his medicine, but some people chose to use this wisdom for evil. You see, with knowledge and wisdom comes the temptation to fall into the lies, into greed, and into power. Those who walk the evil path use these teachings for their own gain, at the cost of others. Those nightmares you've been having, they aren't sleep paralysis. That's what they want you to believe. They want to make you weak, but don't be scared. In your dreams, say a prayer and make it leave. Be strong in your mind and heart, and the great Creator will help you." The medicine man then turned to my father and said, "She is still alive," he said. My father's face turned pale, and I saw a flicker of fear cross his eyes. The medicine man then gave us some beads and arrowheads. He also smudged us and gave us instructions on how to protect ourselves. Place these arrowheads around your home. Use sage and cedar to cleanse your space, and continue asking the Creator to help you. He then turned to me and said, "Sometimes you won't understand the dreams until much later, but when the time is right, oftentimes you are the only one who can understand your dreams." He stopped for a minute, letting his words sink in. "Give yourself a good sage cleansing and talk to the Creator. That will help you." And that was it. We ended up leaving. Now mind you, at this point I still don't know it was my grandma that was cursing us. Not until we got home. That's when my father came clean, you can say, with everything. I will tell you exactly what he said. "When I was young, your grandma used to take off all day, all night, and come back in the morning. She would always say that she was at ceremonies, but she wouldn't bring back food or anything to prove it. And similar to your dreams, I remember waking up in the middle of the night as a kid and seeing some sort of kangaroo with a huge tail standing in the corner of my room, hunched over, covering my ears and closing my eyes. I was always scared of that huge kangaroo appearing in front of me as I opened my eyes. I just remember blacking out every time it appeared. Since then, I knew your grandma was up to something. I just knew it. Throughout the years, I figured that she was trying to get rid of someone close to her, but it never happened. One of the many ways to gain power," my father continued, "was when I was rushed to the hospital for drinking kerosene. I mean, who leaves their grandson around toxic chemicals? Ever since that day, I'm sure your grandfather suspected something, and he never let me go around your grandma again. I guess someone, our ancestors, are looking out for us. Since the whole time growing up, she was actually never able to hurt me. But those around me, like your mom, was a different story. It's not that these people who practice bad medicine can make you do things. There's no way. But it's who they talk with. Those who can have influence over you to do decisions in life that are not the best. Within time, your grandmother just started leaving and not coming home for days. Eventually, your grandfather moved us out to Winslow, and I've been living here since then, which is where I met your mom. Your grandfather seemed to suspect this of your grandmother, so we ended up visiting different medicine men throughout the years, and each one of them has given us hints that it was your grandmother who was cursing us. Ceremonies were performed that lasted weeks, and after some years, everything sort of just faded. Your grandfather eventually passed away, and all the nightmares and weird stuff had stopped happening. More time passed, and nobody heard from your grandma again. Rumors were that she had died or something. That's until earlier this year. I had a dream. I saw your grandmother walk up to the porch of our home, wave her hand over the handrail as if she was casting a spell or performing some sort of ritual. She didn't see me looking out from one of the windows until she knocked on the door and saw me looking. She had a surprised look on her face, like she had just been caught. But I swear this was a dream, at least I thought, until I went to go visit the medicine man that we just went to go see. And surprisingly, he actually knew your grandmother's limits, boundaries, you can say. He told me that after studying and praying, that there was something planted on our front porch that must have been there for many years. He literally had to go to the spot and perform a ceremony to, quote-unquote, reverse the spell. And well, from this point on, I knew that your grandma was still alive and still practicing her bad medicine. He smudged the house and told me to go to bed. He said that we were going to move out, and well, we did. We stay away from Arizona because of this whole situation. I miss my family, my friends, my home, but every time that we do go back, something bad does happen. Maybe if your listeners want to hear more, I'll send you another experience that I had, well, that me and my dad had after we moved out. Also, I'm sure everyone has heard of this, as you have said it in your videos before, which is pretty true. When someone finds out who is doing the witchcraft, skinwalking, a person doing the witchcraft dies. In this case, she's still alive. Apparently, we found out that Grandma has become so involved in the evil way that it has come to the point where nothing is going to kill her except for old age. I'm not sure how true this is, but that's what my father told me, which is why we chose to move out instead. Maybe she's just not a skinwalker and is just practicing bad medicine. Who knows? We haven't heard from her, but we all know that she's out there practicing still. Every culture has its own way of dealing with this sort of evil. Religion is not the only way. Just like within our nation, there are medicine men who use it for evil purposes, communicating with skinwalkers to gain power, corrupting people, or simply out of jealousy. There are some financial preachers who preach to donate, and they say that you will be blessed, when they are actually just stealing money. There are many who use their religion for evil and practice witchcraft. What I'm trying to say with this is that for every good thing, there's the opposite, which is the bad side. My grandma started learning and practicing medicine, but then I guess her heart, for whatever reason, the greed and power, the more she was gaining, the more addicted to the power she got, that eventually she started to pursue bad medicine. We even found out that she was doing animal sacrifices, which is actually what's helping her stay alive for now. This whole situation, if anything, is just pretty sad. Why does she have to practice on us? I was never able to get that experience of having a grandma, which actually makes me shed a tear. It also makes me wonder if she has something to do with my grandpa's death, or even with my own mom's situation and her leaving us. I know my grandma knows that we know. It just proves how powerful she is. I doubt my grandma is here on YouTube listening to your stories, but I also wonder why she hasn't passed along her teachings to someone else if she is close to dying. Maybe she has. I'm not sure. To be honest, I am scared of her. I try not to be. But the reason I am is because in most cases and tribes, the last sacrifice someone has to do in order to become a skinwalker is to kill a family member. Just be careful, everyone. I'll be praying for the whole community. I got a pretty crazy story from a few years back. And by a few years, I mean like 2010. But anyways, me and a group of people that I knew from college decided to go pretty far in the woods for spring break. Some of them were my bros that I had known for a long time, and some were guys that I had only met a few times. There were a few girls. One of them had a family cabin in the spot that we were looking to camp at, and it happens to be the one that we were gonna stay in. My friend Tom is into survival and guns and stuff, and he brought a bunch of emergency supplies, a ton of ammo, and a .308 SCAR. I brought my Glock 17 carry, and two other guys brought their own pistols as well. We were planning on setting up our empty beer cans and shooting them, and just in case of bears and stuff. A little bit of info on Tom. He happens to be a big guy, about 6'4", about 240 pounds, and this guy can fight. He's not afraid of anything. He always goes out pretty far in the woods just because he's that kind of person. My other friend Mark is the exact opposite, and he basically shits his pants if an elevator moves too fast. Needless to say, him and Tom don't get along very well. Everyone gets unpacked. Tom and Rebecca, his girlfriend, well, his ex at the time of writing this, they take a room together. Sarah, the chick that owns the cabin, and her friends took the master bedroom upstairs. Mark and I took another room, and everyone else set up their bed and sleeping bags in the main room of the cabin. The first night, we hear some weird noises off in the distance, but nothing to worry about. The next morning is where things got a little creepier. We wake up to find some blood smeared all over the outside of the cabin. Several raccoons are dismembered and scattered all around the cabin. Mark, as you can imagine, is crapping his pants. Sarah is freaking out, demanding to know which one of us did this sick prank, and for whoever it was to go clean it up. Tom is looking around the perimeters of the cabin, looking for animal tracks, footprints, or anything to explain what happened. The other two girls, Sarah's friends, and the other two guys, one was Tom's buddy Jason, and the other was his little brother David, were most disturbed and grossed out than anything. Sarah was getting angry since everyone was claiming that they didn't do it, and that they didn't know anything about it. I asked if anything like this ever happened out here before, to which she said no. Sarah's friends Courtney and Emily wanted to leave and wouldn't shut up about it at this point. Tom came back over the rest of the group, saying that he didn't see animal tracks or footprints or really anything to explain what happened. He also sided with Sarah, saying that one of us had done it. After a long argument, we agreed that we would stay one more night, and that we would make sure to lock all the doors and windows before going to sleep. Tom, Mark, Jason, David, and myself got stuck with cleaning up, which took about an hour. The rest of the day was pretty normal. We made a fire, we ate some food, we talked about whatever, and we went shooting some cans. By the time we got back to the cabin from target shooting, it was getting dark, so we started up the fire again and proceeded to eat dinner. After we finished eating and started cleaning up, we heard the scariest bloody scream you can imagine. Seriously, it sounded like a screech through a megaphone. Everyone starts getting scared, including myself. Mark, Courtney, and Emily wanted to leave immediately, and were insisting that we just grab our essentials and leave at this point. Tom had his gun drawn and was looking around and said that we needed to go check it out, because what if someone needed our help? I told him that there was no way that the scream came from anything that's human, but he went into the car and came back with a SCAR and a Remington locked and loaded, and he threw me the Remington. He told Chris that we needed to check out this thing for our safety at the very least. Rebecca grabbed him, not wanting him to go. The choice had already been made. We were gonna go check it out. But before we went, Tom grabbed a flare gun and 3 extra flares out of his car. Then he gave Rebecca his Glock and told Mark and Jason to have their guns ready and to get everyone in their cars and leave if we weren't back in 30 minutes or so, or to come look for us if we popped a flare. Tom and I headed out towards the direction of the scream. He ended up taking the lead. We got about 3/4 of a mile away from the cabin when we came across a freshly dead deer that had looked like it was clawed apart. Tom looked at it and said that it must have been a bear, and that the screeching must have been the death scream of the deer. It didn't sound so convincing. The whole situation felt weird, and it also felt like somebody was watching us. Plus, the deer was torn apart. It had blood everywhere, and its head looked like it had been clawed off almost completely at the neck. It didn't look like any other bear kill that I had ever seen before. We got back to the cabin and told everyone else what we found, but they were still freaked out. But they all calmed down a little bit when Tom said that it was just a bear that had killed a deer, and that the bear most likely got scared and ran off when it heard us coming. No one ended up getting much sleep that night. The next morning, we heard a scream come from right outside the cabin. It was Sarah. We all went outside and we saw what was more disturbing than the raccoons. The deer that Tom and I had found last night was scattered all around the cabin. Its head was propped up right next to the door, and the rest of it had been more torn up than it was the night before. Now it wasn't just Mark and the 2 girls that wanted to leave. Now Rebecca, Sarah, and I wanted to get the fuck out of there too. Tom was also on the edge as well. He never heard of a bear dragging his kill towards humans and then mutilating the corpse and not eating it. He wouldn't say, but I could see that he was concerned, even though he still said that we should stay and make the most out of our spring break, to which David actually agreed. He was able to convince Rebecca, Sarah, and myself that we should stay too, even though I could not shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I ended up convincing Mark, Courtney, and Emily that we would be fine, especially because we had a ton of guns and ammo. For the rest of the day, everything was normal, other than the fact that everyone was obviously on their toes. We ended up staying in the cabin most of the day, hanging out and drinking. On that night, when we were eating dinner, we heard once again the same bloody scream from the night before. This time I knew it wasn't a deer. Whatever that sound was, it must have been what killed that deer and the raccoons, and it had been stalking our cabin almost like it was stalking us, trying to get us to go out. This time, Tom had his gun right by him at dinner, and I had his Remington. Then, we heard what sounded like whispers out in the forest. Tom stood up, turned on the flashlight that was attached to his gun, and started screaming, "Whoever the fuck is out there, you better come out, or you're gonna end up dead." This was pretty out of character for Tom. He's the most responsible person I ever seen around guns. He wouldn't point a gun into the woods and be ready to shoot, not knowing what was out there. Then, we see something, maybe 100 yards out. This thing had to be 7 feet tall, and was very thin to be a bear. Tom dumped a 20-round mag in its direction. Then we heard it screech louder than ever before. Mark, Jason, and I dumped our pistol mags in the same direction. We got inside the cabin, not knowing what the hell was out there, or if we even killed it. Nobody slept that night, even though Tom said that the only thing it could have been was a bear. I don't believe that, and I don't even think he believed that. That night, we packed up our stuff and we decided that we would leave first thing in the morning. Before we left, the guys and I went to check where we were shooting the night before to see if there was a body or anything, but there was nothing. There were some bullet holes in the trees where some of our bullets missed. We left soon after and spent the last few days of spring break in our dorms, hanging out with each other and just talking about what happened. Sarah, as far as I know, hasn't been back to the cabin, and Mark will never set foot into the woods again. To this day, Tom and I still go camping sometimes, and we even went camping in the same area last summer, but nothing happened. But I'm not gonna lie, the whole time we were there, it felt like somebody or something was watching us, like something was out there stalking us at night. something that's not an animal, and most definitely not human. I would like to share my experience with you. At first I thought about asking for it to be anonymous, but the truth is that the few people who matter to me and who will recognize this already know about it. I am a real estate agent. Some time ago, when I changed companies, I was lucky to be assigned one of the most important properties we had for sale. Actually, maybe not lucky, as you will judge. We had many expensive homes, but also simple ones. Among these properties was a very well-equipped cabin that used to belong to a famous singer. It even had a small recording studio. It was a small but very high-end cabin, and the path around it had been built very carefully. Despite everything, it seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. You had to search for it very specifically to be able to get there. At times, the road seemed to end, and also any navigation app couldn't lead you to it. It was surrounded only by mountains, and the nearest town was a few hours away by car. It was a real beauty. It was in the Sierra Madre Occidental in Mexico. From what I heard about what people say in the States, this is similar to the Appalachian Trail, a mountain region that runs through different states in Mexico. It had been in the company's portfolio before I even got there. For several years, the owner had been indecisive and asked not to show it, but finally, it coincided with the day that I started, that he finally made up his mind to sell it. It was going to be difficult to sell. The price wasn't low, and it was hard to get to the cabin. It was for a very specific type of person who had sufficient resources and who was extremely protective of their privacy. When I went to go see it for the first time, I had to be joined by another colleague from the firm. There was no way I could have found it on my own. From that exact time, the feeling of being there in the middle of nowhere was overwhelming. It was just the two of us. There's a sense of desolation that I suppose can be stimulating for some type of people. But to me, it was terrifying. And my colleague felt the same way too. He told me he was grateful that it was now my turn to handle that sale. It was going to be a great commission, but he found no joy in having to go there, especially because he emphasized that he had no intention of going back alone. We reviewed what needed to be renovated and left. My colleague insisted we do it before nightfall. There are some parts where it seems the road disappears at night, and it's terrible. Let's finish as soon as we can, he told me. I noted everything that needed fixing and contacted a contractor who told me it could be done in 2 days of work. I wasn't going to travel there 2 days in a row, so I chose to stay in that house, get ahead on some other work, and supervise that all the repairs were done in the best way possible. Staying there alone was the worst thing that I have ever done. That night, I experienced the most scariest event of my life. I traveled there in a caravan with the 2 trucks of the workers and the contractor. Even though I had warned them, they were surprised by how remote the location was. They actually worked very quickly, in a hurry, but I took that as a good thing. It seemed like they wanted to finish everything in one day, but they were running out of time. I warned them what my colleague had told me, that the road gets very complicated at nightfall. So shortly before 7, they started their journey back. I got stuff ready for dinner, and at a certain point, I even began to enjoy that solitude, everything being quiet. I imagined living in a place like that, at least for seasons, writing or doing something similar. Maybe that's why the singer who had built it was attracted to it. I sat at the table on the white wooden porch. That's when I realized there were no insects. I also noticed that there were no sounds of crickets, no animal noises. I tried to remember if I had seen any animals, but not even a squirrel the whole entire journey from the main road to the hour-and-a-half dirt road to get there. It was at that moment when I thought I saw something. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, You know, those situations that makes you see things when they're not really there. Well, that was the case. I thought I saw a woman's face, completely white, among the branches of some trees, as if there was somebody just standing there, just showing their face. I stood up. I took a few steps towards what I saw, and it didn't move, and I rushed back inside the cabin. I locked the door and I looked out the window, and there was nothing there. After a few minutes, I told myself I was just seeing things, so I decided to go back to work in the studio. The silence in the studio was overwhelming. I felt like I could hear my own heartbeat. I dedicated myself to writing on my computer for a while, until I noticed the light starting to flicker. That's when I realized I hadn't checked the gas in the generator, and I had been using it a lot during that workday. I opened the door, and as soon as I did, I thought I heard some laughing in the distance. My first reaction was to think that the workers had returned, but that didn't make sense. By then, they should have been arriving in town. The same sound happened again, catching my attention this time. I went outside to the porch again. It could have been a bird, maybe making a sound that I could have confused with laughing, but there was no other noise, and it was a strange hour for a bird that wasn't nocturnal to be around. I realized it was coming from the same direction where I thought I had seen that face a few hours before. I checked my phone, only to remember that there was no signal in that place at all. A few kilometers away, about 20 minutes, there was signal at times. I remember because I had stopped with a colleague to send a message the first time we went to the place. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. Should I go to town or back home? Was I really going to drive back 4 hours just to return and make it back by morning? I went back into the cabin and started feeling very anxious. My chest started to hurt. I had no idea what was outside, and even though all logic told me it was just an animal, I couldn't contain my nerves. Without thinking any further, I grabbed my keys and ran to my car. I started driving down the path that seemed denser. I drove and drove until the sound of notifications on my phone started to alert me that there was a bit of signal. It was minimal, but it was something. I opened my messaging app and talked with some of the workers. They told me that they confirmed that they had arrived safely and would see me in the morning. I talked a bit with my boss and my girlfriend, and finally, I was able to calm down. It was time to return to the cabin. It was evident to me that my nerves, the solitude, and all the silence had played tricks on me. That's why nobody else wanted to take the task of selling this, despite the juicy commission. It was difficult, but it was my chance to prove that I could do it. I ended up turning the vehicle around. I had barely advanced a few hundred meters back when I realized I had made a mistake at some point. I couldn't see the road ahead. There was nothing but trees. I had to get out, walk back a few steps, and try to figure everything out. If it weren't for the car lights, it would be pitch black out here. I did find a path about 50 meters back at an almost impossible curve. In fact, there were many entrances that seemed like new roads, but they led nowhere. At least at night they seemed like entrances. I figured that most likely from above, this whole area must look like a maze. I imagined it would look amazing if I asked those who would film the cabin to also take some drone shots of the area. I did calm down, but when I arrived back at the cabin, I noticed that the door was open and the lights were off. None of these things were the way that I had left them. I went in to check and saw that everything seemed normal, or so it appeared. I checked everywhere, but there was no one there. Then, I checked the generator, and it was out of gas. It was possible that I simply didn't close the door, and that maybe the air had swung it open. The lights had most likely gone out because the generator had run out of fuel. I began to convince myself that being full of anxiety and being nervous had everything to do with it. I kept telling myself that it was all just my imagination, that I was alone in a cabin in the woods, far from everything. That was all, and I kept repeating it to myself. I was in the back looking for the gas tank for the generator when I heard something else. The sound of footsteps as if someone was walking inside the cabin. I rolled my eyes and pinched myself, as they say, to know that I wasn't dreaming and that I wasn't imagining anything. It was real. Someone was walking inside. I walked slowly towards the side. If someone was inside, I didn't want them to see me through the windows. In the distance, at the front, I saw my car just as I had left it, with the door open. I crouched and approached, but I heard the footsteps inside also heading towards the door. I heard them open it, and then I heard someone walking towards the car. From my spot, I couldn't see who it was, but we were less than 3 meters apart. The footsteps descended from the porch to the gravel floor. Not knowing if they would walk towards the side where I was, I dropped to the ground and rolled under the cabin's floor. The space underneath was enough to hide me. I couldn't see, but I could hear the sound of steps going around the cabin onto the gravel path. After some time of listening to them, I focused on making as little noise as possible. I was very tired. It must have lasted about half an hour until I was sure that no one was close. Then, I decided to come out. I approached and closed my car, making sure everything was still there. I went into the house and secured the doors and windows. Everything seemed fine. I did try to stay awake. The plan was to sleep until the workers arrived the next day. They said they were going to arrive here very early and everything would be fine. I kept repeating to myself that everything was going to be okay. However, around 3 a.m., I was dying of sleep. My eyes were closing. I thought maybe I could sleep in the locked studio and nothing would happen. It had been hours since I heard or saw anything strange. I looked for some water, a blanket, and a pillow, and then that's when I heard a noise. The glass of water fell from my hand. The car alarm had gone off. My instincts kicked in and made me run to the window. And there, illuminated by the flashing lights of the car, I saw somebody running towards the trees. It was a woman wearing some kind of tunic, but something was very strange. Her legs, they were bent backwards, like a dog's legs. It almost seemed like she was running backwards, but it couldn't be. Imagine somebody running towards the trees with their legs backwards. Seeing this almost made me pass out. I let the alarm continue until it turned off on its own. Then I went to the side of the door. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen, and I couldn't stop shaking. I'm not sure what happened, but I guess I fell asleep right there by the door. The first rays of sunlight came out of a distant sound. An engine, the sound of an old car making a lot of noise. I could hear it from afar because the mountains carried the echo for miles. One of the workers from the previous day arrived, joined by some of the locals from the neighboring village, who had come to help finish the work in one day. One of them noticed my dark circles and told me that as long as I stayed out here alone, I would continue not sleeping. At that moment, I couldn't ask him more because he started working. However, at lunchtime, I found out that the 3 people from the village were somewhat surprised that I had stayed alone. I'm not sure why, but I ended up telling them what I had seen. Normally, in any other moment of my life, I would have felt embarrassed to share what happened to me, but at that moment I couldn't hold it in. One of them even nodded as if he understood me. When I described what I saw near the car, they confirmed that I had encountered something evil. However, what they told me next almost made me leave the entire country. They said that this wouldn't be the only thing that I would come across. While we were talking more, I realized something. Whatever it was, had to have approached the car to set off the alarm. And this car, like all company cars, had a front and rear camera recording with motion detection. I couldn't wait to return to the city that same afternoon and review the recording, hoping to see whatever it was, to find out if it was real. It's very strange to confront things you can't explain. Something that shows you that there's a whole world of unexplained things out there. That terrible night in the cabin, the night that I believe I saw things that were not natural. We finished working around 5 p.m. and set out on the way back to the city. All the workers from the village seemed to be nervous about being there all day. I don't know what happened as the hours passed, but later it was a feeling that was also seen among everybody, even those who came from the city and didn't know any of the stories surrounding that area, those mountains. Nothing happened for the rest of the day, and we headed out of this creepy-ass place. We stopped in the village on our way back and invited everyone to eat because no one had done so until then. The local guys ate with us before heading back to their home. I was very lucky to get their contacts because hours later, when I got to the office, I received a text message from the contractor saying that if they were needed again, they wouldn't go to the cabin. The excuse was that it was too far. They had a contract with us, which they were risking by refusing, and they had already gone to different places even further away. Everything, the whole situation was very strange. I took the car's camera to check if anything happened, but they told me it wasn't working. That was obviously a lie because we always checked it. So I ended up asking the tech support guy to give it a detailed check, saying that I really needed those images from the previous night, and he promised that he would recover them. The following days, I was so focused on other properties that I almost forgot the awful experience I had at that place. That's until my boss told me that someone was interested, and I had to show them the cabin. He also wanted me to take his son Andres with me so that he could gain some experience. Andres was a good, extremely intelligent guy, despite being only 19 years old. Even though most people thought that he was only working there because he was the owner's son, I had the chance to talk with him since we started on the same day. I truly believe he had inherited his parents' talents. I was also grateful that I didn't have to go back alone. It would have been crazy to tell my boss I was afraid of a cabin. It never even crossed my mind to tell him. Maybe that's why it was easy for him to tell me that he had 2 more clients scheduled for the following day, and he suggested that we stay overnight in the cabin to avoid a return trip. Great. I got ready this time around. I brought extra gasoline in case the generator failed or ran out. I carried a hunting knife that belonged to my father, and I also took a small cross that was blessed in the Vatican, which was actually my mother's most prized relic. I took it from the house without telling her because I doubted she would lend it to me without explaining why I needed it. Andres picked me up in his dad's truck, an all-terrain vehicle built to withstand anything, which actually made me feel a little safe. However, since it wasn't a company vehicle, it didn't have the camera. It was a very nice day for the trip, but as soon as we left the city and arrived at the village, we noticed the black edge of a storm approaching. I called my boss from there and I told him it was likely that we would be hit by heavy rain, and I asked him if he was sure that the potential clients would still come despite that. He said yes, and I mentioned feeling a bit risky about it, and he replied that he had actually let us use his truck to avoid any excuses. I had no excuse. It was time to continue. I tried, without sounding scared, explained to Andres how strange this place was. Maybe I wouldn't have done it, but I felt obligated to notify the local guys that I would be at the cabin again and to let them know. They reassured me, if anything happens, go to the areas with signal, and we'll come. That actually made me feel calm. Andres was a bit skeptical. He was actually making fun of me, but I didn't want to say anything. I prefer to think that nothing would happen, and that I would come across as crazy, rather than him realizing how creepy that place could be. From that point on, I drove because I knew the road, and it was going to get tricky once we entered the dirt road. Almost like it was destined to be. The first drops of rain began to fall. We moved slowly and the rain was still very light. Andres rolled down his window, and so did I. It felt nice. The truck was built for this, so we weren't worried about getting wet. We stopped to enjoy the rain, but then I started to feel something I don't remember feeling before. With each meter that we advanced, it felt like we were heading towards danger, almost like we were walking into the mouth of a wolf, into the gates of hell. That's funny, Andres said. What's funny? I asked. If you look closely towards the trees, it feels like there's people among there, almost like there are faces emerging from the branches, he replied. I looked to the sides, and after a few seconds, I noticed it too. It wasn't like there were real people there. It was more like there was something in the forest, as if there were ghostly figures standing among the trees. But it seemed like an illusion caused by the movement. I can't describe the relief I felt when I realized that there wasn't really any people standing there, watching us. When we got to the point where there was cell signal, I stopped and got out of the truck. I tied a ribbon to a tree, a golden ribbon. I told Andres that in case of an emergency, this was the only spot for miles where he could call for help and communicate with anybody outside of this. Alright, I'll come running back here to talk with my girlfriend, he said, pointing to his backpack where he had, indeed, running clothes. We continued the journey and finally arrived at the cabin. We got out of the truck and I stayed to unload my things while Andres went ahead with the keys. However, a few meters from the porch, he stopped, staring inside. I grabbed my backpack and stopped next to him. You feel it too? He asked. Yes, I replied. There's someone inside. It was strange. We could both sense it. We entered. Even though we checked every inch of the cabin, we felt like someone was here. Just as the rain started to pour even more, the client's truck arrived. However, it wasn't the interested party himself, but two people who worked for him. A man in his 40s with the appearance of an old movie accountant, and a young woman of about 25, small and thin, but with a much more imposing presence. From the communication, we realized that she was in charge of all the decisions. Sorry that our boss couldn't come, but he does trust any decision that we make. He asked us to check a few things, and if everything meets the requirements, he'll end up coming with an offer, she said. We had no reason not to believe them. The interested party was the owner of a chain of a regional retail store. They quickly glanced around the inside of the cabin, and without asking us a single question, went outside. It almost seemed like their boss cared more about the surroundings. The man went into the forest, and the woman asked us for some reason to show her where the septic tank was located. It was very strange, but we assumed these were normal details that they were interested in. We stood on the porch waiting for them. The rain started pouring, but it didn't seem to bother them. I noticed Andres was looking towards the trees at the spot where I thought I had seen the woman the first time. And I kid you not, the same thing was there. Look, it looks like there's a woman standing there, I said. There is a woman standing there, dude, he replied, very serious. He grabbed my shoulder to stop me from moving, insisting that I pay attention. I noticed how that face, which seemed to be formed by chance among the branches, had moved. It turned to the side and disappeared into the trees. Before we could do anything, we heard the man returning through the trees from the opposite direction that we were looking. He shouted to the woman that everything was ready and that he had found it. We didn't understand what he meant. The woman approached them and asked if everything was ready. He replied yes, everything was there, whatever it was. She turned to me and said that her boss would contact my boss. No, he needs to negotiate with me, I responded. No, they have to negotiate with me, she replied firmly, and without saying anything else, they headed back to the truck. The man approached us and asked if we were staying the night, and if we wanted to drive together to the village. We're actually gonna stay. We have to show the cabin again tomorrow, but thank you. I said. Look, man, we're actually gonna make an offer, but don't stay here, he said, sounding concerned. Or at least that's how it seemed like. Thanks, you can make an offer, but we're expecting one from a client who already visited, and also the response from tomorrow's clients. Try to contact Carlos as soon as possible to give you priority. He's actually in charge of the sale, I said, trying to sound confident. Y'all two take care on the way back, Andres also said, trying to sound professional. No one had ever visited the cabin before, and we weren't sure what would happen the next day, but it was a good technique. It put us back in the spot of making the actual decision. Do you really think they'll scare us away so we won't show it tomorrow? Andres asked once the man left. Imagine bringing a woman to stand far away to scare us, thinking we believe in the paranormal. Andres grabbed his phone and raincoat, and he told me he wouldn't take long. He was gonna walk to the area with a signal to talk to his girlfriend. I told him it was very far on foot, but he said he liked the rain and the mountains and would be fine. I looked at him as he walked away, but I ran to catch up with him. I handed him the hunting knife and I asked him to take it with him. After I lost sight of him, I went to the truck and got the cross. Somehow, I felt like it protected me more than the actual knife. It was getting dark, and that's when I heard a strange sound coming from the back of the cabin, among the trees, like an animal, but a huge one, almost like a bull, or something like that. I then heard the branches move, almost like something very tall was walking through them. I ran back to the truck, and I parked it closer to the cabin, ensuring it was nearby in case of any emergency. When I got out of the truck, I went inside the cabin. I closed the door, and for some reason, I felt like I needed to look through the window, and that's when I saw it. A figure among the trees. Keep in mind it was almost completely dark outside, and just like that, it disappeared. At this point I was questioning myself if I was going crazy. I sat down for a few minutes, trying to figure out what the hell was going on, and as I was sitting in the cabin, that's when I heard footsteps outside. I figured it was Andres who had came back already, or chose to come back instead of continuing on. But that's when I noticed that the rain had stopped. As I peered out the window to see who was outside, that's when I saw it. Not one, not two, 3 or 4, but 5 figures among the trees. At least 5 from what I remember, moving as if surrounding the cabin. I couldn't tell if they were naked, but they seemed to be from that distance in the darkness. There were some smaller ones and others that were tall, like men and women. Then, I noticed one of them deviated from the trees and started walking towards the cabin. At that moment, the motion sensor light outside activated, and I could see him much more clear now. He was wearing a crown of thorns, and he was bleeding from the forehead. It was obvious that this man was dressed like Jesus. As soon as the light hit his face, he took a few steps back, and then I heard a car approaching in the distance. The man disappeared, but when the car arrived, I recognized the people inside, workers from the village. In the back seat, Andres was lying down, completely pale, as if he had seen a ghost. I hurried to greet them, but Andres ran past me, ignoring me, and rushed into the cabin. They parked the truck next to mine, almost touching the stairs. They even backed it up as if ready to leave at full speed. I wanted to ask what was happening, but they told me to get inside quickly without wasting time. And we did, and they started checking all the windows. Do you have enough gas in the generator to last all night? One of them asked me. I do, but what's going on? I replied. They signaled for me to stay silent, turned off all the lights except the one at the entrance, which didn't face the path. They waited for Andres to come out of the bathroom, and then we all went into the office. They turned off the desk lamp, leaving us in complete darkness. With the office door open to hear any sounds from outside. Someone knocked on the door. Andres seemed out of it. Despite the workers signaling for me not to, I left the office. Not that I was trying to be a hero, but I wanted to keep everybody safe. I crawled across the floor of the cabin until I could see the door. The light outside seemed to have gone out. The knocking continued. I moved through the cabin, trying to figure out how many people were outside. I couldn't hear anything, and the door didn't seem to open despite the knocking. It was as if something had touched the door and then disappeared. I started crawling across the living room to get to a window where I thought I could see the entrance. That's when I started getting this terrifying feeling. A feeling of being frozen and numb, as if my body was starting to go to sleep, and I started struggling to respond. I stopped in the middle of the living room, the most exposed part. I looked up at the window that I was trying to get to, and that's when I saw something clearly, despite the darkness. A woman at the window. It didn't close completely, and through that small gap, something was trying to poke its head through, staring at me. The only way to describe her is that she looked very demonic. That's when I screamed. They all said that I screamed very loud, but I don't remember. I only remember ending up with broken nails and splintered hands, somehow dragging myself back to the office. The next thing I remember was about half an hour later. I couldn't speak. They say that I kept screaming, and that Andres was also in a terrible state, looking for the keys, telling everybody that we had to go. They started laughing, saying, "We won't get far. All the roads disappear at these hours. We should stay here a bit. Maybe in the meantime, they'll leave." I didn't understand what they meant, but that's when one of the workers said to come look out the window, and it'll make sense. That's when we saw figures walking away slowly, taking one step every few seconds. Among them, I thought I saw the woman from the window. She was wearing a mantle similar to the Virgen of Guadalupe, but black and gold. I saw it clearly and connected it to the man dressed like Jesus. I didn't understand what kind of strange, crazy people were around here, where they came from, or what they wanted from us. I had so many questions. Why were the workers there if they were so afraid of these mountains and roads? Why did they even come for us? Could I even trust them? There was no reason for them to lie. They knew we would be here because I had notified them. I know it was a good choice to tell them this because they kept an eye on the cars heading from the village to the mountain. They started telling us that they saw the clients who went to see the cabin for the buyer. When they passed by, they only noted the vehicle. However, when they returned, they arrived at their shop with a scratched and dusty truck, branches stuck to the front. It looked like they had driven through bushes rather than the actual road. The truck was also extremely hot and steaming from the engine, as if it was an old or damaged vehicle, but it was actually quite new. They said that when they saw it going up, it was in perfect condition. That's when the man who got out of it collapsed on the ground, and the woman that was driving asked them to check the damage and to see if they could make it to the city. They asked what happened, and the young woman asked them to just fix the truck enough so they could continue their journey. She walked away to make a phone call. The man that was with her began to catch his breath and told him an animal had crossed their path, causing them to veer off the road and fall into a shallow ravine. Fortunately, the truck managed to climb out with its four-wheel drive. The animal had followed them for some time. Well, there are very few deer around here. I don't know what kind of animal could have made you veer off the road and then follow you through the brush, one of the workers replied. Are you sure it was an animal? Well, what else could it be? The man said, seeming to get agitated just by the memory. We were driving normally when it came at us. It was on two legs, but it wasn't a person. It wasn't a woman, even though it looked like one. Its face was snout, demonic-like. He didn't even have to describe it more. They already knew what he was talking about. Knowing the stories of what supposedly happened to outsiders who venture into the forest. Everyone in the village knew the stories, but very few had actually experienced them. Apparently, even fewer had seen her, if you could actually call her that. But the ones who would often suffer, especially those who came from outside. They couldn't understand why there was so much traffic heading to that area despite the stories. Maybe nobody believed in what the villagers would tell them. I'm not even sure why they chose to come for us. Maybe they liked me, or maybe they knew that I was going to have more work there. When they heard the couple's story about what had forced them off the road, they finished fixing the truck, closed the shop, and headed to the cabin. Far from the area with cell signal, closer to the highway, someone suddenly crossed their path. They were driving slowly, alert because it was getting dark, when something jumped in front of their truck. It was Andres, asking for help, terrified, saying over and over that something was following him and that they should turn back and head to the village. But they told him that he couldn't leave me alone there, convincing him to return to the cabin. As they drove, they said that they saw several people approaching from the same direction, not ghostly figures, but actual people walking towards the cabin where I was waiting. These people didn't react to their presence. However, Andres was terrified because he had seen something very different. They arrived at the cabin just in time and were now ready to spend the rest of the night with us. No one leaves the forest at those hours, and now we're there just waiting. After a while, these figures that had tried to enter the cabin, or at least had approached to knock, had started moving away. Who were those strange people? What were they actually doing there? Not even the workers could explain it. Suddenly, we heard something in the distance, and Andres ran to hide underneath the bed. I'm not lying, he actually ran to hide like a kid, followed by the others who pulled me with them, all scared. Their calm demeanor had completely disappeared. "She's here, she's here, she's here," they repeated, even though everything was locked and we had secured the windows. We all hid underneath the bed like children. Whatever was outside, it felt different. Underneath the bed, Andres had stopped responding. He had passed out, and our instincts were telling us that we were in the presence of something horrible. Then, there was some kind of crying, something that made it clear that it wasn't an animal, for no animal in the world sounds like that. But I know it wasn't human. And then suddenly, everything felt different. I'm not even sure how to explain it, but there was a silence that felt almost like tranquilizing. I stood up with one of the workers, and we approached the door. Somehow, the fact that we were no longer in fear from moments before indicated that it was no longer near. It's like you could feel it inside your chest when it was there, but now it wasn't. We stepped outside and it seemed like there was very little air. We couldn't hear anything, and it was very difficult to breathe. We managed to wake up Andres and got together near the door, ready to run to the vehicles if anything else happened. However, Andres looked very fragile. I felt like he couldn't handle another situation, and I was actually worried for him. I suddenly touched my pocket, and I realized I no longer had my cross. It wasn't with me. I started looking for it all over the cabin, under the bed, on the bed, but it wasn't there. My mind started to clear as I retraced my steps from that night. Then it hit me. We still had to show the cabin the next day. I couldn't return to my boss with just a ghost story. I had to convince Andres not to say anything. We would be made fun of. No one would believe us. I would probably get fired, even if all of us told the same story. Andres fell asleep with a fever, and he started sweating as well. I tried to convince the workers to stay at least until the morning, to just pretend to do some repairs and wait while we showed the cabin. I couldn't leave without doing it, and I didn't want to be left alone if they ended up taking Andres. I convinced them by offering to pay them, as if they had done some repair work. After a few minutes of them talking between themselves, they agreed. By the way, it was only 2 workers. That night was terrifying. Also, there are 2 things I want you to understand. 2 things that I haven't shared yet, and that I don't want to share with the general public. That's the name of the workers. Why? Well, they still live in the village, and it could be dangerous for them if revealed. And the name that the locals gave to this thing that's in here in the forest, well, it's a name that they told me only once that night. And they clearly said that it should never be repeated, especially not outside of here. Anyways, the night went on and we didn't even sleep. As dawn approached, I thought everything had passed, at least for that night. However, something else happened. Just as the other presence had made me feel fear when it was nearby, I had this feeling to look from the window. When I did, I saw it from behind a tree trunk. It was hairless, very pale. The features, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth looked more like black smudges. It was something very strange that seemed more like a vision that you get when you don't sleep. I told the workers to come look at the window, and they did. It was strange. I can't assure you that it happened, but we thought we saw it peek and then run towards the mountain, and it was still naked and thin. That's when the worker said that whenever dawn approaches, there was always somebody heading up to the mountain. They said that's why people come from far away for the door. When I asked what they meant, they only answered that they were talking about the door to hell. It was strange, to say the least. I can describe it somehow, knowing about this belief. I'm not saying that I think it's true. I swear on my children's lives that even I don't know what to believe. Even if I were in your place, listening to the story, I wouldn't believe it. That's why it's so difficult to share it. But I think that no one shares their experiences when something happens that goes beyond a paranormal situation, like hearing voices or seeing a dead relative at home. People are comfortable believing in that, but not something more. Even though the world is full of evil things, spirits and everything, proving it to us every day and every night. Everything changed when I realized I was sleeping a few feet from a door to hell, and yet nothing was happening. The last minutes of darkness that night were peaceful. When the dawn came, we had breakfast with coffee and cookies, the only thing that we had available. By 9 o'clock, the 2 workers started cleaning around the septic tank in the back, pretending to do some repairs. Right at 9, we saw 2 new black, current year model trucks arrive. The windows had that super dark tint that you couldn't see inside. We knew right away that these might be very special clients. I approached them a few feet to welcome them. Andres was still very unwell, trying to compose himself inside the cabin. From one of the trucks, a short man with a military haircut got out, and he walked to the second truck, where someone rolled down the window slightly. He made a signal and 2 more men got out of the first truck. It was clear to me now that they looked more like bodyguards or military personnel than assistants, unlike the ones from the previous day. They said they would inspect the place. I tried to give them some information about the purchase options, but they said everything was already arranged. "Do you want to hear a tune?" the first man who got out asked with a smile, referring to a hit song by the singer who owned the place. Honestly, I said I didn't. His smile faded, and they headed to the back. Another man with the same look got out of the truck and stayed back, and started walking towards the forest. At that moment, I realized that they were looking for the same thing as the previous clients, but that only raised more questions about this place, about what it was, and what could actually be out here. As I continued looking, the somewhat friendly bodyguard approached me again. "Do you think it will interest your boss?" he asked. "People have shown a lot of interest," I said. Without responding, he walked into the cabin where Andres was still pale, sitting in the living room. Is he alright? He asked, sounding concerned. Andres, still in a terrible state, looked up and nodded weakly. Does he need anything? The bodyguard asked. He replied that everything was fine. The guy continued walking, closing the door behind him. He didn't even try to hide what he was doing. He started kicking the floor as if searching for something. Then, he opened the door and told me, crazy people, huh? He kept smiling and left. I didn't even dare ask him anything. When I stepped out, I saw two of the bodyguards checking the workers' credentials. I told them everything was fine and that they were trustworthy. Alright then, they said, handing back the credentials. They all returned to the trucks except for the one who had stayed with me in front of the cabin. I thought he was going to make small talk or ask a question, but he just stood there with a mocking smile. I think he knew I had thousands of questions for him, but I didn't dare ask. That's when someone whistled from the trees. The guy from the other truck, the one who had gotten out later, approached and handed something to the man in charge. Then he walked towards me, standing next to Andres and the two workers. Did any of you lose this? He asked, holding out a cross that was covered in dirt. My mother's cross. It looked like it was buried for a long time, old and worn, and even had some mold on it. Yeah, it's mine, I said. Be careful where you leave these things around here, he said, getting too close to me. He added something in a seemingly friendly tone, but it sounded like a threat to me as well. Don't show it to anyone else, and leave this place. You don't want anything to do with fixing things here anymore. Get to an area with cell signal. My boss will take care of the purchase. He got into the truck. As they turned around to leave, he rolled down the window and motioned for me to come closer. I don't mean this in a bad way, but leave and take your commission. I actually spent a night alone out here. His eyes widened. You've been here since last night? Then take your things and get out of here. Go slowly so you can catch up to us. I'm not sure why, but he seemed sincere. I told the others to pack everything, and we ended up leaving quickly, especially Andres and me, knowing that we wouldn't have to return if it was sold. We sped up as much as we could, as much as the road allowed. It felt like it was disappearing at times. We ended up following closely behind them on the dirt road, and once we reached the highway, they drove off as if it were an emergency, and we lost sight of them. I called my boss and found out that there were already two offers on the table. The first from the previous day's clients, but he said we had to accept this latest one. I didn't even want to ask why. Once I got off the phone, I tried to talk to Andres, trying to calm him down before we headed back to the village. We arrived at the village and one of the workers offered to let us rest for a while there. I ended up leaving Andres sleeping, hoping that he would feel better. But people were friendly. Well, they always been. In these remote, smaller villages in Mexico, everyone seems to get right along and be treated like family. The worker who let us stay in their home went to his shop, leaving us in the care of Don Teo, his father. He was an older man but still strong, with a rancher's build. He was very kind, setting up a place for Andres to rest. Don Teo said that I should let him be alone, and to take a look around at the shops and the stands. I found a table on the sidewalk where a lady was selling some homemade food, and I ordered something without thinking twice. She was selling some gorditas. The lady sat with me as I ate. Did you come to see her too? Are you here to ask for something? If you did, don't do it. The last ones who came never came back. They were the ones who always came staying all night. But one day, they didn't come back. We knew they were important because the army and helicopters came looking for them, but they were never found. As the lady spoke, it started to rain, so she moved me to a table under a small roof in her yard. The village was set up to where someone's house was basically their store as well, with stands right in front of their porch. With the rain, the few people on the street went inside, disappearing from sight. I finished my meal and was ready to leave. I didn't want to hear anything that this lady had to say. I just wanted to sleep. I was exhausted. But that's when the shouts of Don Teo got my attention. He's gone. The boy is gone. I ran towards where the shouting was coming from and saw that our truck was no longer there. Andres had left in it. How was I going to get back? What was I going to tell his father? Besides, he didn't look too well to be driving safe. I quickly asked Don Teo how I could get to the city to try to catch up with him. He looked at me and said he didn't head to the city. He went back up towards the cabin. How is that possible? I said. He couldn't have done that. I didn't want to go back up there. Not again. I asked Don Teo if Andres had said anything before he left, and he told me that Andres had woken up clutching his chest, asking for his medallion. I then remembered the medallion of the Virgin Mary that Andres always wore, given to him by his late grandmother, as he had said. I couldn't believe he had gone back for it. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack. I asked Don Teo about his son, and he said he would be back soon from the shop. However, he did offer to take me up there. I must have looked so scared that he felt sorry for me, which is most likely why he helped. I mean, Don Teo looked up there in age. So we got into an old beat-up car that barely seemed to run, and very slowly we began going up to the cabin. The wipers didn't work, so we moved at a snail's pace. We reached the end of the paved road and continued on the dirt path. Eventually, Don Teo said this was as far as he could go. The car wouldn't make it any further and would get stuck. I thanked him for helping me so much and got out. As I did, Don Teo told me, "Whatever you do, don't spend the night here." After about 20 minutes, I found myself at the familiar spot with cell signal. It wasn't yet 5 p.m., but it felt like the night could engulf the place at any moment. I ran through all the mud and puddles, and that's when I saw our truck. It was locked, which I took as a sign that Andres had left it that way. The thunder indicated that the storm was only going to get worse. As I kept running towards the cabin, I saw it from a distance. However, I slowed down before I made it to the tree line. On the porch of the cabin, I saw something. It was that woman. That horrible, disfigured woman. She was sitting at the front porch. She was looking down, but I could tell she was smirking. I hid behind a tree, peering out cautiously. I realized I was at the very tree from where those things had been watching the house. I looked around nervously, feeling like all hell was going to break loose. The cabin was not an option. There was no way I was going to go into that cabin, and I wasn't planning on getting any closer. And where the heck was Andres at? I had to get back with him, but there was nowhere to run. I had to find him. To be honest, I did want to head back, saying that it was his fault for coming back here, but I felt guilty. I couldn't leave without Andres. I couldn't abandon him. Could he be inside the cabin trapped? Did he go back and I missed him on the way here? One thing was for sure. I wasn't going to go inside the cabin, not with this creepy lady in the porch waiting. So I left. I didn't know what to do. Maybe he's on the way back to the vehicle and I can catch up to him. And worst case scenario is that I end up trapped up here alone in the rainy night. What stupid decision did I make? I should have just waited for him at the truck, or left a note on the truck or something. I then started panicking. Fuck, I gotta make it back before he leaves. That's when I started running back. The storm was approaching quickly, and the forest was becoming darker. I kept moving, calling out for Andres, but only the sound of the wind and distant thunder responded. The trees were swaying, and I continued, and I swear I would see shadows in between the trees. After what felt like an eternity, I saw a faint light in the distance. It was coming from a small clearing up ahead. I approached quietly, my heart pounding, and there, in the middle of the clearing, was Andres. He was holding his medallion and looking confused and scared. "Andres!" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned, relief washing over his face when he saw me. "Thank God," he whispered. clutching the medallion tightly. I found it, thanks to her, pointing to his medallion. But I got lost on the way back. We need to get out of here, I said, grabbing his arm and guiding him back through the forest. The storm was almost upon us, and the path seemed to be even more rocky on the way back. We hurried as fast as we could. The storm broke, rain started pouring down, and thunder started cracking overhead, but it felt like a relief compared to what we had just been through. However, those feelings of relief quickly faded when I thought I saw people walking in the same direction as us, figures among the trees next to us. I know it wasn't my imagination, because Andres was also seeing it. We started running as fast as we could, before realizing that we should have got into the truck by now. Instead, we ended up coming close to a ravine. Damn it, where are we? We stopped for a second and looked around. I could see with the remaining light a canyon at its bottom, something that looked like a cave, and right in front of it, I saw silhouettes of people. There were about 13 of them, holding hands and forming a circle. Then there were 6 more holding hands and forming another circle around the first 3. And then more and more circles. I couldn't count how many there was, but there were 6 circles of people, one inside the other. We started running again towards what we assumed to be where the truck was at. At this point, we both said screw the truck, and if we have to run all the way to the village, so be it. As we were running, about 50 meters behind us, I turned to see if any of those things were following us. Well, of course they were. Why did I even look back? At the strike of a lightning flash, I saw something running towards us on that very same path. It was the woman, the one with the fucked up legs, running right after us, with her head sideways, almost like it was falling, smirking. I'm not sure what I believe anymore, or what I saw, because even Andres didn't confirm. But I swear that the woman looked almost skeletal, as if she barely had skin, or like if it was rotting, like a running corpse. I convinced myself I was just imagining, just the light from the lightning, that I saw nothing. That's when we started praying to all the saints, to God, to our Mother of Christ to guard us from all this evil. And Andres started screaming, Dios mío, por favor ayúdame. God, please, help us. I could hear the sound of her running behind us, getting closer. And that's when I heard the scream that still haunts me to this day, a demonic scream. At this point, I just closed my eyes as I knew we were about to be taken to I don't know where. And that's when I heard a voice behind us. It was her. She whispered,
Te veré en tus sueños. I'll see you in your dreams.
And just like that, the running sounds behind us ceased. I looked back and nobody was there. Suddenly ahead, I saw some lights that brought me back to life. They were the lights of a patrol vehicle, or so we thought at first. But as we got closer, we realized it was a rescue ambulance. We ran to them, begging for help, screaming. Don Teo was standing there beside our truck with 2 paramedics. At this point, Andres was yelling for help as we got to the clearing. The paramedics checked us, attended to us, and one of them took the keys to our truck and drove it behind the ambulance back to the village. We were trembling so much we couldn't have driven. We were in the back of the truck. Alright, let me explain. This isn't like the States. We're in a remote village where the ambulance is not a covered van. This was a makeshift truck with a high tarp over the bed. Don Teo had mentioned that he had to beg and beg for responders to go up to the cabin, as it was forbidden. But the ambulance that the village uses might have been able to go, and he pretty much had to convince them to come. I told the paramedic about the people we saw, that there were a whole bunch of people back there, like some secret cult or something. No, brother, he said. Nadie va allá arriba. No one goes up there anymore. All the roads are closed. The last ones who went up there never came back down. We got to the village. They waited for us to ensure we could drive, as we were ready to leave at that moment, after calming down a bit. They were trying to convince us to spend the night. We kept insisting we saw people, swearing we saw something very strange as well. The young paramedic who drove our truck, a medical intern, said, "Look, I'll be honest, we don't believe in that stuff, but we can tell you what the locals have told us. They say those people are dead, strange folks who used to come here, and then suddenly stopped returning. They said that their souls went into that cave, through the door as they call it, but their bodies stayed around here. People say that the cave is a portal to hell." Andres was shaking his head as the intern spoke. "I know what you're thinking. They're just stories or legends. But that's what they say. They say that those bodies move every night, so they are never found." We then went back to Don Tel's house. I thanked him for his help, and we rested for a while, trying to shake off everything that just happened. Andres was still shaken, but he was slowly getting better. We did spend the night there, as it was pretty dark to head back to the city at that time. The next morning, we left early, determined to never return to that cabin again. My boss told us that the sale was finalized. I didn't even ask any more questions, just glad anything to do with this fucked up cabin was finally done. It was around midnight when I finally dropped off Andres at his house. Everything in the city seemed strange to me, almost surreal, as if nothing could scare me anymore. I was grateful to see this side of life. We never did go back to the cabin again. I was able to get the pictures that I requested from the guy that was in charge of all the cameras. I'm gonna try to take a picture of it and share more information with you, but it's gonna have to wait until I finally resign to start my own business in the same field. Me and Andres did go to church for the next few weekends, trying to receive blessings and cleansings from the priest, which do seem to work as nothing happened after that. However, there is one thing that still scares me to this day, and that's every time that I'm gonna go to sleep, I hear those words, the words of that lady.
Te veré en tus sueños. I'll see you in your dream.
Hey everyone, I don't have a Skinwalker story today, but I have something that's even worse than that. I want to start off by saying that I am Navajo, and I've been living in the Navajo Nation my whole life. And of course with that comes with growing up as a kid. It was getting close to the end of summer, and we were all hanging out. This was back then when I was a teenager. It was starting to get dark. You get a group of young boys together, and of course they're going to do something that's not good. Well, we dared each other to go into an old hogan where a person had died. The hogan actually stood at the edge of town, kind of isolated from everybody. Now, why did we dare each other? Well, it was a place where the elders had warned us about, claiming that's where a chinde was. If you don't know what that is, it's the bad energy left from the last breath of the person who passed away. They said something about this being a ghost that contains all the sins of a person's life, and if the person died indoors, it can cause ghost sickness. Of course, we told each other this before we actually did it. But again, young teenagers, boys, daring each other, we made our way to the hogan. We opened the door, revealing nothing but darkness. There wasn't no ghost inside there. I'm not sure what we were expecting to see. Maybe a dead body. But it did feel a little weird. The air felt thick, almost suffocating like. We stayed only minutes, but later on we would find out that this was enough to bring something. My friend Jacob was the first one to get sick. What started off as a simple fever turned into a sickness that was starting to last a few weeks, with complaints that he felt like he was being choked. The doctors were baffled, and his parents were desperate. Meanwhile, that's when my nightmare started. vivid and horrifying, all nightmares about the hogan, and seeing what looked like a creature inside the hogan, but the dreams felt real. I was planning on telling my parents about this, and I guess be grounded for about 6 months or so, but before I did, somebody knocked at our home. The parents of Jacob stood at the door. Their faces were full of fear. They had a quiet conversation with my parents outside. After about 30 minutes or so, my parents came inside. They called me to the kitchen and questioned about everything that we did. They explained the seriousness of our actions and what we had done, the danger that we had invited by entering the hogan. The Chinde wasn't just a ghost. It was the evil itself of a person, a spirit that we didn't see that was lingering around the hogan. Even mentioning the name of a dead person can bring a Chinde to you, which is why you should never speak of the dead. Anyways, my parents ended up calling a medicine man. The ceremony was arranged pretty quickly. He performed a cleansing rite with sacred herbs, filling our home with smoke and the scent of juniper. As the ceremony finished, everything did feel different. Jacob also had a ceremony done. The nightmares that I was having went away, and Jacob ended up getting better. There was another friend that was with us, and I'm not sure what happened with him. Him and his family ended up moving out the res when summer was over, so we never found out what happened with them. Yeah, we learned the lesson alright. And on top of this, we were told to never speak of that night again. And so with that, I leave you with this warning. Beware the places where somebody has died, for within its walls lingers a Chinde, an evil spirit born from the final breath of that person. If you enter the place, nightmares and darkness will haunt you. Some doors are best left closed, and some spirits should just be left undisturbed. Say a prayer after listening to this story. There was a crazy guy back in my hometown named Roy. A little background on how Roy went kinda crazy, and then I'll tell you about a supposedly haunted murder weapon. Yeah, just bear with me. This is gonna be followed by the time that I saw something weird on his property as well. The story sounds kinda crazy, but it's all true. Pretend that you're back in my hometown, an unnamed place. So we got this guy, his name is Lane. The dude is basically a menace, kind of like a local celebrity, but for all the wrong reasons. We also have these two brothers who are very well liked, Roy and his brother. One day, Lane invites Roy's brother on a hunting trip. Roy's brother is super easygoing, and despite knowing Lane isn't exactly friendly, decides to take him up on the offer. The two boys go up into the mountains, but only one of them comes back. The death of Roy's brother is ruled a hunting accident, and there's not enough evidence to say otherwise. But knowing Lane, everyone is suspicious. He becomes a true outcast and spends the rest of his days living alone on the outskirts of town. He is able to sell one of his guns, and it changes hands a few times. People say that this gun is the rifle he used to kill Roy's brother with, and for this reason, it's said to be haunted. For anyone interested, the rifle was a Winchester. To be more exact, it was a Winchester model 1892, 20 inches, or maybe the next size up. I can't remember exactly. Minimal checkering on the handguard and butt. The gun could have been basically a museum piece. It was a beautiful gun. Anyways, one of my buddies ends up with this rifle. He's kind of an out-of-towner and picked it up by chance, not knowing the history behind it. He keeps it locked up in a safe. When he first shows it to me, he tells me he thinks the thing is bad luck. He claims he's had some weird experiences ever since he bought it. Strange accidents, and some serious, like a severe windstorm causing major damage to his home. Just misfortune after misfortune. I only experienced something minor with this gun. It was the first time that my friend showed it to me, and at that moment, the TV was on in the background. The moment that I took the gun in my hands, the TV turned to static. My buddy and I looked at the TV. There was a long moment of static. I quickly handed the gun back, and the TV went back to normal. Like I said, kind of a minor thing, but it was still creepy. What I didn't tell my buddy at the time was how I felt when I held this gun. For reference, I have tons of war trophies in my collection, some with pretty grisly histories. I have fired a bunch of guns in my life, but I have never felt what I did when I held that Winchester. It was impossible to describe, except to say it gave me an ominous feeling, like a darkness hanging over me when I was holding it. After that, I couldn't help but wonder what exactly went down in those woods with Lane and Roy's brother. As much as I love classic rifles, I'm glad that one of them stayed back in my hometown. Well, 1,400 miles away from where I live. I forgot to mention that Roy himself, well, his mental health went down. It was after his brother died. I'm not sure if it's related, but Roy was later diagnosed with schizophrenia. It was pretty sad. Every few months, he would go off his meds and do some crazy stuff. For example, one time, I found him attacking an asphalt road with an axe. He was screaming about zippers. Apparently, he believed there were underground tunnels all through town, leading directly to his little shack. He would say that zippers, at least that's what he called them, which was basically a thief, would use these tunnels to sneak into his place, steal his stuff, and disappear before he noticed. He also sometimes claimed to be a reincarnated soldier from the Union Army, named Robert G. Steen. He would even spell it out, Steen. So yeah, it was pretty bad. Roy went from being the most well-liked guy in town to being banned from just about every public space. He and that evil guy Lane became our town's outcast. Anyways, my family and Roy's family had always been super close. After Roy went schizo, my parents had me check up on him from time to time. I would deliver water to his shack and also see how he was doing. I actually didn't mind doing this, even when he was off his meds. He was always very friendly with me, no matter what state he was in. He seemed to remember me and said I was a good person. However, he would still do some weird stuff. One time, I was at his place, and he offered to show me the room, where he said that he spoke with the devil every night. I declined. Back to my sighting, I was delivering water as usual, and this time, I had one of my friends with me. When we got to Roy's place, we found that he had ripped up all the floorboards in his shack to expose the underground tunnels used by the thieves, or zippers. He had tossed all the wood outside and set it ablaze in a bonfire. Being off his meds made Roy a serious talker, so my friend and I stayed for a little bit. It was getting towards the evening, and Roy was starting to ramble about some weird stuff, about something in the woods. The flames of the bonfire were still going on. That's when he looked at us and began to ramble about the strange and terrifying things that he has seen. He would say, "Did you know the trees have eyes?" His voice low. "They see everything that happens in these woods. Sometimes, late at night, I hear them whispering. They tell me things, secrets about the people in town. Dark, terrible things." Roy's eyes then started looking around as if he expected the trees to start speaking at any moment. He continued, his voice growing a little bit stronger. "And the tunnels, they aren't just for the zippers. No, there's something else down there. I hear it scratching at the walls at night, trying to get out." My friend and I looked at each other, but Roy was lost in his own world. That's when he started talking about the night that he met the devil. "He comes to me in my dreams," Roy said. "He stands by the tree sometimes over there. Other times he sits down over here and whispers stuff to me. He tells me that my brother's death was just the beginning, but sometimes I see shadows moving in my shack. Even when the fire is out, they creep up on me, trying to drag me into the darkness. I know they have been sent by Lane, trying to finish what he started. The woods around us grew darker, and yeah, we should have gotten up by now. There was a moment of silence. Roy's head then snapped up, and he looked directly at me. "Do you believe in curses?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because this place, my life, it's all cursed." And it all started with that thing, with that rifle. The mention of the rifle sent a shiver down my spine. The scary events surrounding it, combined with what happened with Roy, just made everything terrifying. My friend and I decided it was time to leave, but just as we were about to say our goodbyes, I spotted something in the trees behind Roy. It looked skinny and tall. It looked to be covered in shaggy black hair. It stood there for a moment before turning away into the woods. After it disappeared, I was staring into the trees when my buddy tugged at my sleeve and asked, "Did you see that too?" That moment gave me goosebumps. Believe me, the two of us had a long, silent, and very intense car ride home that night. We didn't even talk about what we had seen until we were back inside the house, feeling safe. After talking about it, I gathered that my friend only saw the thing after it had moved, but I got a better look at it. We talked about what it could have been, but we couldn't think of any explanation that fit. Eventually, we just dropped it. These days, that patch of woods is abandoned. Roy's shack was demolished a while back, and the road leading up to it is blocked by fallen trees and old abandoned cars. It almost looks like the road was blocked by junk, maybe to keep people away. Who knows? I never did hear about Roy again until recently. He passed away. The rumor, or the story, is that he committed suicide. As far as that thing that we saw, we never saw it again. I guess just be mindful of stuff that you buy, or if it's given to you. You never know what's the history behind it. Be safe. Three summers ago, during a boar hunting trip down in the Ozark South, I ran into something that I just can't explain. I just got back from college, and I really wanted to get out in the woods, and I was really bored on a Friday night. So I chose to head out super early the next morning for a boar hunting trip with one of my best friends. We'll call him JD. Now, I've been hunting in deep south swamps all the way up to Alaska, and JD is an Eagle Scout, so he's not really prone to being scared so easily. We pack our stuff up and we leave this place around 12:30 a.m. After stopping for the breakfast of champions of beef jerky and also some energy drinks, we arrived at the area around 2 in the morning. Now this area that we're hunting in is very nice. We hunted it before many times in the daylight. We seen tons of deers and squirrels and even a baby fawn. We pulled in off the gravel track about 40 miles from town and 3 miles from this gas station, which doubles as a deer check station. We had a mountain lion walking our tracks on a previous trip at one point, so we rolled the windows and tried to take a short nap before the morning. Right away, we were hit by this nasty, sickly smell. I just brushed it off, making a dumb joke like, well, you know, just some wet deer. This just means that our smell won't travel too far in this heavy, damp air. JD looked at me and said, "Bro, that smells like death, putrid, like a cow that's been in the sun too long." We end up staying, choosing to stick through it. The smell ends up becoming very strong, but at the same time we didn't want to go around in the woods. You know, there's mountain lions that can follow us on the day or night, or even worse, being accused by some forest ranger. So instead, we decide that we're just gonna take the drive down to the gas station. However, JD's vehicle won't start up. Well, I guess it's gonna be sleepy time, followed by hunting, while we wait for a hillbilly mechanic to come and jumpstart this car. All the while, the smell just seems to be seeping through the vents and the cracks in the windows. It gets to the point where I'm just retching in the car. Enough is enough, and we both decide that if something had gone and died, we prefer not to be stuck next to the rotting corpse. So we get out of the car. We're parked in the middle of this gravel kind of parking area, and there were nothing but woods on the other sides. So just directly west of us was this swamp. And the swamp was full of boar and some deer and just other critters that you might find there. And I'm just sitting here loading my magazine into my rifle. But that's when I notice that JD is scanning the tree line with his eyes. He seems to be on edge, but I'm feeling fine, so I just dismiss it. After we're done suiting up, we make our way down the small footpath, which is about 2 feet wide, and then it goes down into the swamp. However, for some reason, when we get to the tree line, both of us just stop dead in our tracks and just started staring into the woods. We stared for a few minutes before either of us spoke. It was almost kind of like shining a flashlight in the mine shaft. And something in the deepest part of my brain was telling me to go back to the clearing and wait in the center until daylight. So we end up doing what any caveman would have done in that situation. And so we grunted out a few excuses to preserve our manhood, and then went back and sat down by his car. Because personally, I'm not gonna go through the woods at 3:15 in the morning when there's mountain lions, weed growers, and God knows what else is out there. The smell ended up kind of receding back into the forest, so we just busy ourselves with checking our rifles and talking about girls and politics. After a while, the smell started coming back again, and we began to voice our concern that something that smelled just dead was moving around. As the smell starts growing more and more oppressive, I start hearing branches and twigs breaking in the undergrowth. Whatever it is, it's moving, and I don't like that one bit. At this point, I'm thinking it's a mountain lion that's all covered in gore from a recent kill. But that doesn't make sense, because it would be going full territorial mode on us. That wouldn't have been out of the question, but that's not what it was. My first thought was that we either had a ranger with a sick sense of humor, a drug grower with a great sense of humor, or worse, a serial killer. Either way, weapons were shouldered, bolts were closed on loaded chambers, and lights pointed towards where the sound was. There was just nothing, just a smell, and a slower, and then it stopped. The smell is everywhere now, and whoever it is sitting far enough back in the tree line so as not to be silhouetted by our lights. They're smart. There was no eye shine, which ruled out just about any other animal that I could think of other than a boar, which makes enough noise to be easily noticeable. Once again, the caveman brain rears up deep within me and tells me we need to build a fire right now. So what do? JD and I build a fire. Throughout this whole affair, other than a few moments, we've been mostly quiet. The fire seems to give us some kind of comfort, and whatever it is seems to back off into the forest, if only for a while. As the fire burned hot, we started joking again, having a decent time, convincing ourselves that it was just a big cat or something. However, there's only so much timber in the gravel clearing, and after a while, we would have to venture out of the firelight to keep the fire going, and that time came. As the fire burned down to embers, the smell came back more oppressive than before, and with that smell came an almost oppressive feeling of fear. Not just a normal fear, but an intense, guttural fear that made your muscles tense, your stomach turn, and your eyes grow wide. Every fiber of our being told us to get more wood, to keep the fire going. Only with the fire would we survive the night. So cautiously, we walked to the tree line, barely able to see it from the dying light. We've been trying to save the battery of our flashlights. I was on guard duty. My rifle would be a better standoff weapon than the one that JD had. At this point, my adrenaline is flowing from a feeling that something just isn't right out here. JD then leans down to the undergrowth to pick up a stick, reaching into the tree line. He screams and falls backward while branches break right in front of him. He gets up, freaking out, dusting himself off. He says that he saw something staring at him. Sunken eyes, ashy gray skin, and he said it smiled at him. Not so much a smile like a human. This intense moment was followed by another hour of this game of us building the fire back up and retreating back into the woods, and then the fire dying and then it coming back into view again. I should note that this entire time, quote unquote he, as we were calling it now, was circling us. I guess probing our defense, seeing if it could find a way to get up close without being seen. By the time that 5 a.m. rolled around, we had exhausted almost all of the dry firewood that wasn't within the tree line, except for the tall grass on the northeast side of the road. Well, of course, we do what we have to do and slowly pick our way over to the tall grass. By this point, I have taped the flashlight to my rifle, and I switch it on as I leave the fire to get some more dry grass. As JD is filling his hands with tinder, I check my right hand side and look down the road. I wish I hadn't. Just as I swing the flashlight over the road, I see him for the first time. Grayish black, with matted gray fur, or some kind of skin. To be honest, I couldn't really tell. It crossed the 10-yard track, really quick, hunched over, maybe 5.5 to 6 feet tall, moving almost like a gorilla. Something in my head just started screaming, "It's over. It knows you've seen it. It's not just being territorial. It's circling like a predator." We ran back to the fire and popped the dry grass on top and waited for the smell to recede. Except, it didn't. If anything, it got closer, more intense, and this time, we heard it, moving closely. So we pushed out and got into the trunk of JD's car and listened as it passed behind and in front of his car and back into the trees. I decided that we either make the 3-mile run down the dark countryside to the gas station and pray that the lights are still on, or we build a fire big enough that one of the farmers or someone driving on the main road can see it. We end up deciding that sprinting the 3 miles to the dark countryside, guns on our backs, could get us devoured by whatever this is, or shot by a farmer. So we did the next best thing. I pulled a small tree out of the ground. I'm not talking about a bush. I'm talking about a small 8 to 9 foot tree. It's amazing what adrenaline can do for you. So much adrenaline that your facial muscles are drawn tight. Your eyes dilate to nearly black. In any case, the fire burns bright, very bright, and after a while, he retreats further back into the woods, and this tree happened to burn for a long time. Eventually, maybe 30 minutes after throwing the tree on the fire, these 3 lifted trucks came barreling down the road and into the gravel parking area. The first truck had an insane amount of those off-road lights on the bull bar and on the roof, which actually lit up the whole area like it was the sun. The smell instantly goes away, but still, no one gets out. Then, a man wearing a National Guard t-shirt and ACU pants hops out of the second truck with his hand on his hip. He had a concealed pistol. He questions us for about 10 minutes, makes us disarm and clear our chambers, and set our rifles in JD's car. He tells us there's a burn ban on, and we shouldn't be out here screwing around. We explained that our car died, and we came out hunting and made that as a single fire. He just looks at us strange whenever I say the word hunting. He walks back to truck number 1, and comes back and tells us not to come back there unless we have all of our ducks in a row. The third truck drives over, and a man hops out and starts to jumpstart our car. I shake his hand and say thanks, and he gives me a worried but sympathetic look. He doesn't say very much but walks back to his truck and just simply drives away. Truck number 2 leaves shortly after, once we get everything packed up. The window of truck number 1 rolls down, and the chubby man calls me and JD over and says, "There's no boar here. If you're hunting for boar, you best be looking further down the road, at least at the other end of the county." Now, I know there's tons of boar here, I'm not gonna mouth off to the hillbilly militia that just saved my life. So I thank him for his advice. JD and I get back in his car, debating whether or not he had gone away with all the commotion. Just as soon as the big man had pulled out, the smell returned yet again. Fuck no. We hop on the gravel road, drive down the highway, drive past a few farms and make our way towards the border of the county. We noticed, however, that we're still being followed by a small white Honda. And guess who's sitting in the front seat? The big guy and the other hillbilly militiaman. They follow us all the way out of the county, and then simply turn around. I'm not sure what me and JD saw out there, but one thing's for sure, I'm never going back into those woods again. As far as those men go, well, I'm not sure who they were. If you all have any ideas, let me know. The reason I'm sharing this story is to find out if this has happened to anyone else. This is 100% true, and it's really hard for me to share because anytime that I have tried to tell someone else about it, I get laughed at and accused of just trying to pull their leg. I recently saw an article about a woman who was hunting, and she saw what seemed to be an invisible creature that she described as almost like a predator from the movie of the same name. I read her story and saw the picture she took of this thing. Now, as far as her picture goes, I personally think it's a combination of flare from the sun and a close-up of possibly her face or something. I'm not dismissing her story though, actually quite the opposite, since I have also encountered something similar. And it's actually what's prompted me to seek out if anyone else has encountered one of these things in the woods. Now let me tell you, when I was about 5 years old, I was playing by the edge of the woods behind my grandmother's house. I played there often and my grandma just kept an eye on me from the kitchen or living room. She would come out every once in a while just to see what I was up to. I was obsessed with digging in the dirt and collecting unusual rocks and arrowheads that littered the land where my grandmother lived. I should mention this is Midwest Illinois, not too far from the Cahokia Mounds, so finding arrowheads was actually not that uncommon. Anyways, that day I remember picking out a spot to dig. I had been out there for quite a while because I remember I had a pretty decent sized hole going, and that's when something caught my eye up in the tree that I was next to. I almost don't know how to explain it, but it looked like almost a heat wave coming off the branch of the tree. It was fall. I remember this because I had my jacket on, and I remember thinking that my mom was going to be pissed at me because I had dirt around the bottom of the arms from digging. I also remember there being a lot of leaves on the ground. Anyways, I am staring at this quote-unquote heat wave, and I realized it has a human shape. So here I am, 5 years old, and wondering why there's an invisible man in the tree. I remember feeling scared but unsure what to do. Then, it started moving and making a faint clicking sound. That's when I decided that maybe I wasn't supposed to be seeing this, and so I hightailed it back to the house. My grandmother saw I was pretty shaken, and I remember telling her that I just saw an angel. In my 5-year-old mind, I didn't know what else it could be. I had never heard of a ghost or monsters, so to me it had to be an angel because that's all my little mind could think of. So now jumping ahead to when I was about 12 years old, by this time the encounter was way out of my mind. I love watching action and sci-fi movies. My dad had rented the Predator movie. As we're watching the movie, and the first time that you see it invisible, I almost shit my pants. All the memories from that day digging in the dirt came flooding back. I even asked my dad if it was real, or if he knew if anyone or any animal that had the same ability that I didn't know about. He told me it was all fake. It wasn't like it is today, where I could just look it up on the internet. So again, I just put this out of my mind. 2004. I'm grown now. I have 3 small children. I just went through a separation from my spouse. I moved to the next town over to an apartment with my kids. These apartments are all one-level duplexes with there being 5 buildings. I am at the very last apartment of the last building. The apartments are considered in town, but are on the outskirts. There is a ditch that runs behind the buildings with a chain link fence that separates the backyard from the ditch itself. There's about 6 to 7 trees on our side of the fence. If you follow the ditch a little bit, you hit a small forest that eventually leads to the country with a larger forest and farmland. I am a smoker, but I wouldn't smoke in the apartment because of the kids, so I often went out to the back porch. One night, I was up late doing laundry and stuff after the kids went to bed. I decided to take a smoke break before I went to sleep. I am back there on the porch and I started hearing this faint clicking sound. I immediately looked to the ditch because I had seen a groundhog out there a few days before, and I thought that maybe he was out there again. The yard is faintly lit from the outside light that is by the playground that is to the right of my back porch. I didn't turn on my porch light. I didn't normally if I was just going out for a quick smoke. I didn't see any groundhog or movement from the ditch, so I go back to smoking my cigarette. The clicking sound keeps happening, and a slight shift of movement makes me look up into the tree to the left of my porch, and it's there. The same invisible thing I had seen when I was 5. It's like a distortion, but in a humanoid shape. It was crouching down on the branch with an arm out, holding onto the trunk of the tree. I couldn't believe it. Is this really happening? As it came to kill me from seeing it all those years ago. All I could think about was my kids in the apartment sleeping. So I ran inside and slammed and locked the door. I ran to the kids' room and I made sure all the windows were locked. Then I just turned out the lights in the living room and I started staring out the blinds towards the tree to see if I could catch another glimpse of it. I sat there for about a good 10 minutes and I couldn't see anything. I began to think that maybe I was just tired and that my head was playing tricks on me. Just as I was finally talking myself down, my neighbor's dog comes running across the yard and starts barking at the tree, at the same branch that I had seen this thing at. That pretty much freaked me the fuck out because this dog was not a barker. I had actually never heard him even bark at anything, even at the groundhog that had been hanging out in the back. This barking went on for a few minutes until I heard the neighbor who owns the dog call him back inside. The dog then turned to go back home, stopping every few feet to look back at the branch of the tree until he was out of my sight. I didn't sleep that night, and I have never seen anything like it again. I don't know what to think of it. I am a grown person. I have kids and a good career. I just want to know if anyone else has ever had an experience like this. I know what I saw, whether you believe me or not. Thanks for listening. They're evil. The witches of the Navajo Nation. Powerful witches. They go through the training that medicine men do, except that they practice bad medicine. They are humans, so their exact motives are different. Well, they vary, just like with all humans. Maybe they're looking for vengeance. Maybe they're just crazy, greedy. However, majority of them are tricksters, causing fear. They'll fuck up your life. They'll kidnap you, kill you, and then do stuff to your body. They cause sickness and cast curses by using bad medicine. I know you've spoken on numerous stories about these things and the different ceremonies needed. One of them being called the Blessing Way. These witches pervert the traditional way and perform their own ceremonies as well. They call it the Witching Way. I'm sure you heard that knowing who they are or saying their name will kill them. But I also heard stories that if you see their human face, it will kill them, which is why they shapeshift and wear pelts. And the only way to get rid of one of these witches is by having a medicine man conduct the Blessing Way ceremony. Who am I? Well, my name is Alex. It's a generic white boy name. I'm aware. But I was actually born and raised in a small town called Chinle. Chinle is deep in the mountains of the Northeast Navajo Nation. In the northeast corner of Arizona, we have a school. All the basics to survive, you can say. For those who aren't familiar, you have two parts of the town, one on each side, with nothing but dirt roads in between. While many Arizona small towns have an American feel, this cannot be said for any town on the rest. The reservation, including Chinle, was filled with poverty, alcoholism, abuse, and social isolation. It's the closest you can get to hell within the U.S. So with all this being said, so maybe that's why you won't find it strange that after buying vodka from a friend at the age of 16, I was walking back home. My father was abusive. My mom was dead. I had no real reason to return home for the night, nor did my father have a reason to care if I returned. If anything, he made it feel like I was a burden to him. So I had a bottle of vodka in one hand and a gun in the pocket of my jacket, in case some shit went down, as it tends to on the rest. I remember it was sometime in March at night. The temperature was below freezing. A light dusting of snow was falling from the pitch dark night sky. That's the one benefit of the Navajo Nations. Clear night skies. But that's pretty much it. Instead of taking one of the main roads that everyone drove through, I chose to go around, the long way basically, where nobody ever drove. Now why did I do that? Well, imagine a young teenager walking in the middle of the night with a bottle of alcohol. Mind you, it wasn't a bag, but still, you didn't want to be caught, or even worse, end up being robbed. I was walking along a 2-lane road when I heard some rustling noises in the bushes to the left, and I spotted a coyote. I shrugged it off. I had dozens of encounters with coyotes in my life. I had no reason to fear it. I took another swig of vodka and continued walking. That's when the wind picked up. Something felt deeply ominous, in a scary way. I looked over to my left again. The coyote, which must have been 25 yards from me prior, was now about 10 yards away from me and slowly walking towards me. I didn't panic, trying to feel tough, but I would be lying if I said I didn't have a small fear at this point. 30 seconds later, I'm still walking down the road. The coyote is within about 20 feet of me. It just seemed like it was just following me, being curious, almost like if I had a nice slab of steak in my back pocket. I kept an eye on the coyote, but I started growing deeply concerned. The wind started picking up and the coyote got closer. I considered the options that I had and realized that I could get fucked over if I didn't act soon. Seeing that I was the track star at Chinle High School, well, before I was expelled, I bolted, I sprinted, I ran. I looked back and the coyote remained walking, as if he didn't want to bother some drunken teenager running through the desert. That's when the coyote picked up his pace, and within seconds, was just a few feet behind me. As I looked back, I swore its eyes were yellow. I had never seen anything like this in my life. Scared, I threw the bottle of vodka towards it, hoping it would scare it away. To my surprise, I actually ended up hitting it. Not that I was aiming for it, but I guess someone or something was looking out for me that night. Not only did I hit the coyote, the bottle smashed across its head when it came no more than a foot behind me. While the coyote stopped and started making all sorts of weird noises, I wasn't fucking around. I continued running. I stopped for a second and looked back. The glass was lodged within the coyote's head. I looked back and saw a pool of blood forming on the icy road. I looked in front of me, running, thinking how I ended up in this situation. Well, I know exactly how I ended up in this situation, but it wouldn't count if you blame yourself. I looked back again, and then ahead of me. I looked back and did a double take. The coyote no longer had a glass on its head, and it was now running full force towards me. So I did something that is completely illegal on the res, something worse than bootlegging alcohol at the age of 16. I pulled out my grandfather's old pistol I carried and fired a shot. I missed. I tried again. I missed again. The coyote is now again a few feet behind me, and it seems to be snarling something, as if it's trying to communicate. I fire a third shot. This time it landed on the coyote's head again, and you better fucking believe I didn't stop to celebrate. I had seen what this thing was capable of. I dropped my pistol, not sure how or why, but I dropped it and ran and didn't even look behind me this time. Then, I saw the headlights. I stood in the middle of the road, motioning towards the car, attempting to stop him. Most Navajo people don't pick up hitchhikers for safety reasons, so I was gonna force this guy to let me in by stopping in the middle of the road. Within 10 seconds, the man driving the vehicle came to a stop, almost slipping on the black ice. I stood by the passenger door and he rolled down his window. Let me in. A fucking coyote is chasing me. I'm not a criminal. Please, sir. He simply nodded his head and he let me inside the vehicle. He must have been drunk, I figure. As I got in and buckled my seatbelt, I looked at the rear view mirror of the car, and that's when I saw it. The coyote was running behind us, easily going about 30 miles per hour, maybe more. The man took notice of this and took off. Hey kid, is this thing chasing you? He said in a slur. That's when it hit me. The faster it ran, I began to see it more. A pelt on its head. This thing was now on its hind legs. The old man then looked at me and locked eyes with me. Don't look at it. Stop making eye contact with it, he said calmly. That's a Navajo witch. I will drive fast now, okay? He said. We started going at 60, and it followed, and it was still behind us. 65, 70, and it was still keeping up. Once we got to about 80 in his beat up Toyota, the thing was no longer visible in the mirror. The old man then looked at me and said, you know, if that thing wanted to get you, it would have. It was just playing with you. I looked at him confused, and he just chuckled in a drunken fashion and said, I know why you're walking around here at night. Get out of my car at the next stop, and I don't ever want to see you again. About 10 minutes passed and we didn't say anything. We got to an intersection, and the old man looked at me and said, this is where you get off. I thanked the old man, and he just took off. After that night, everything changed for me. I ended up learning about these things. I kind of knew about them a little bit, but I never really did believe in anything until this night. I stopped drinking. I ended up going back to school. My life did change for the better. Of course, I still had issues and struggles with other things, but I learned a lesson that night, and I hope that you don't gotta go through something like this to believe in these things or to turn your life around.